Hey guys, tonight we begin with a slow, careful step beneath the skin of our familiar world, an exploration of the quiet, cool, and often invisible realm that lies below our feet. Tonight we'll listen to the sounds of deep stone and shadow, follow the paths of water that have carved secret passages for millennia, and consider, gently, seriously, the possibility that intelligence, in a form we have not yet met, might prefer to dwell where light is thin and the air tastes of minerals. In the chapters ahead, we'll move from the broad reason scientists and explorers believe the subsurface is full of surprises, to the myths and memories that different cultures have passed down about people below. We'll sit with eyewitness accounts from caves, mines, and forgotten tunnels. We'll study the strange patterns of disappearances near subterranean regions, and we'll look at the physical evidence, caverns, lava tubes, sonar blips, and anomalous thermal readings that suggest the underground is not simply empty space. We'll also consider why governments build deep facilities, what whistleblowers whisper about, and what motives a hidden, enduring species might have for remaining out of view. Finally, we'll let ourselves imagine what it would feel like slowly and calmly to realize we are not the only intelligent ones who call this planet home. Before we settle in and begin our peaceful journey, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if what I share here truly resonates with you. Your support helps me create more of these videos, and if you feel like it, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see the many corners of the world where we connect. Now, dim the lights, make yourself comfortable, and let's ease into tonight's journey together as we explore what lies ahead. Chapter 1: The Hidden World Beneath Our Feet. Why the underground hypothesis exists. Imagine lying on a warm summer evening, the grass cool beneath you, and letting your attention slide down through the ground, through soil, through packed stone, into dark, slow spaces where temperature evens out and the pulse of the world feels different. Beneath our feet, the earth holds vast volumes of empty space, carved by water and fire, stacked like rooms in a house we have not learned to live inside. From a distance, this is not merely geology. It is a set of environments with their own rules: pressure and humidity, mineral scents, slow-moving currents of water, pockets of air that never see daylight. The idea that life could exist here is not fanciful. Life on Earth has found refuge in the most unlikely places, around hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor, thriving on chemical energy, in the dark recesses of caves, where blind fish and bioluminescent bacteria persist, in fractures kilometers below the surface, where microbes metabolize rock. These are facts, quiet and magnificent. They teach us that biology is flexible, inventive, and persistent. If microscopic life can adapt to these conditions, so too might more complex life, given time, isolation, and steady resources. Let us take the widest view first. The planet's crust is not a solid, unbroken shell. It is a jigsaw of tectonic plates, punctuated by fault lines, folded layers, ancient lava flows, and vast cavernous networks formed by water and lava. The largest of these, lava tubes, karst systems, and flooded cave labyrinths, can stretch for miles. Consider the great voids hidden beneath karst landscapes, the sinkholes that open without warning, and the underwater caves that dive deeper into cold, black water than any human has ventured. The sheer scale of these spaces makes the idea of undetected inhabitants less implausible. It makes them plausible enough that careful scientists and cautious explorers take notice. There are places where human curiosity has not fully reached. Ocean trenches slope into pressures we cannot easily tolerate. Some continental depths remain uncharted because drilling is expensive and the returns uncertain. Within mountain ranges, ancient lava tubes act as insulated passageways, stable, shaded, and protected from the storms of the surface. In many countries, military and industrial activity has created restricted subterranean zones, complexes where the public is not permitted, where corridors and chambers might be large enough to shelter whole ecosystems of their own. These are real, tangible reasons to look below. Now imagine the data that nudges some researchers and many informed enthusiasts from possible toward likely. Seismic networks routinely pick up low-frequency sounds and pulses that do not always match known tectonic sources. There are nights when instruments tune to the hum of the Earth record patterns that resemble deliberate modulation rather than random noise. A slow rhythm, a measured cadence, like a distant footfall or a drumbeat slowed to geological time. In quiet laboratories, researchers adjust filters and listen again, translating rock and vibration into sound we can hear. Sometimes those recordings are simply geological mystery. Sometimes they carry a pattern that invites speculation. Thermal imaging, too, can surprise. Satellite and aerial surveys have revealed localized warm anomalies in regions that would otherwise be cool, small islands of heat, isolated from magmatic activity. These thermal signatures can be explained by geothermal flow or by trapped water channels, and often they are. But on a few occasions, researchers have found temperature shifts that do not match expected models. A warm corridor where models predicted cooling, a pulsing warmth that migrates subtly across a valley. When instruments show a moving hotspot that appears to seek cooler rock, the mind begins to trace possibilities. Fluid flows, chemical reactions, or something alive moving in ways our current instruments only begin to detect. We also have the quiet evidence of sound, low-frequency rumblings that animals notice before we do, subsonic tones that cause a sense of unease in some people and calm in others. Many deep cave explorers report hearing a thrum in the rock, as if the mountain itself has a heartbeat. At times, these sounds are explainable. The shifting of glaciers, the settling of a gorge, the distant rumble of a storm. Yet across cultures and across continents, similar reports recur. In places where cables and sensors are sparse, humans have listened with a curiosity that predates our instruments, and they too tell of slow, low notes coming from the stone. There are also anomalies in the instruments we trust every day. Survey teams mapping subterranean resources sometimes report interference on their GPS units when they descend into certain zones. Pauses in signal, inexplicable jumps in location, or static that wipes out readings for brief spans. Borehole teams drilling deep into the crust occasionally retrieve olive-grey residues that do not match the expected mineralogy, or they register a sudden change in temperature, sudden enough to require pausing the operation. In an otherwise routine drilling log, a single line can stop an entire industry in its tracks. Unexpected thermal change at depth, reduced drill rate. It is important and soothing to remember that most of these anomalies have ordinary explanations. Water finds pockets, rock occasionally glows with the heat of chemical reactions, and instruments sometimes record ghosts. The Earth is a complicated machine, and we are learning its language slowly. Still, when a pattern accumulates, a cluster of thermal anomalies, a chorus of low-frequency sounds, a series of instrumental glitches, curiosity grows. Curiosity is a good companion to calm investigation. It asks gentle questions and seeks patient answers. Think too about the ecological logic for life beneath the surface. The deep Earth provides stable temperatures, protection from surface radiation and storms, and, in many places, a long-term source of chemicals or geothermal energy. A community that evolved in darkness would not need the sun's daily rhythm. It could develop senses attuned to pressure, chemical gradients, and low-frequency acoustics. Over long timescales, such a population could refine strategies for moving through rock, exploiting existing tubes and caverns, expanding fractures with chemical tools, or even adapting to use mineral structures as shelter. Evolution is a slow sculptor. Isolation breeds distinctiveness. A species that turned inward thousands or tens of thousands of years ago would be unfamiliar to us now, and perhaps careful to remain that way. Some of the most persuasive reasons to consider the underground hypothesis are the places science has already shown us as habitats for life. Deep-sea vents host ecosystems powered entirely by chemical energy. Caves host blind species that navigate without sight, using touch, subtle currents, and chemical cues. Microbes thrive kilometers below the surface, metabolizing rock. These are real-world precedents that offer a roadmap for more complex organisms adapting to subsurface life. They do not prove cryptoterrestrials exist. They only show that Earth's hidden environments are biologically fertile in ways human imagination once failed to conceive. Now let me tell you a short story that sits at the border between caution and wonder. It is rooted in the kinds of things that actually happen to researchers, then coloured gently with the sort of detail that keeps a listener awake to the possibilities. Picture a small research team lowering an array of sensitive microphones, geophones, down a newly opened borehole in a remote mountain valley. They expect the ordinary, rattles of loose rock, the distant echo of moving water. Instead, they record a slow series of pulses, spaced with mathematical regularity, like footsteps marching through a cathedral. The pulses sweep through frequencies the team has catalogued before, but here they arrive with intervals that suggest choice. When the team raises the array and tests the instruments on the surface, the pulses are absent. Later, a thermal survey of the valley reveals a faint migrating warmth, crossing the landscape over weeks in a pattern that follows the pulse recordings. The team files their notes, cautious and thorough, and shares the data with colleagues. Some offer geological explanations, fluid migration, microseismic activity. Others file it away in the margin of curiosity, but the researchers cannot help feeling they listened to something intentionally paced, a rhythm that could be natural or could be the trace of something more deliberate. Stories like this are not meant to force belief. They're an invitation to remain open, to follow measured evidence, and to treat the unknown with the same disciplined patience we give any scientific question. The underground hypothesis exists because layers of natural data, geological structures, unusual thermal signatures, low-frequency sound, and the robustness of life in extreme environments combine into a portrait that deserves respectful attention. It becomes more compelling when you add human contexts. The vastness of uncharted spaces, the history of cultures who tell stories of people below, and the existence of restricted subterranean zones. As we begin to close this chapter, allow your imagination to move slowly through a limestone cavern, past walls etched in time, across a floor of silt that remembers the footsteps of water long ago. Picture the hush, the gentle drip, the air cool and steady. Consider the idea that intelligence could choose such places for their survival and secrecy. Consider that this intelligence, if it exists, may be cautious, patient, and adapted to a rhythm very different from our sunlit lives. That gentleness in itself is calming. A species that hides is not necessarily hostile. It is conserving, perhaps watching, and perhaps waiting for a moment of mutual understanding. In the next chapter, we will travel from these physical and scientific foundations into the stories people have told for millennia. The myths, legends and archaeological echoes that suggest our ancestors also sensed something below. We will listen to those tales as pieces of a larger tapestry, not proof, but resonance. Chapter 2: Ancient Civilizations and Myths of People Below, Echoes from the Past. As you settle deeper into your space, let your breathing slow and imagine listening to stories that pass from one generation to another. Stories that hold small, steady truths folded within the language of myth. These are not bedtime tales stripped of meaning. They're cultural memories, encoded in symbol and ritual, and they invite us to listen closely to what our ancestors noticed about the world beneath them. Across the planet, in distant languages and separate continents, people have told of others who live below the surface. These are not always frightening tales. Often they are reverent, cautious, and full of rules about respect for thresholds and passageways. Consider the layered meanings of such stories. They are warnings about dangerous places, explanations for the unknown, and sometimes, if we listen differently, hints that ancient humans recognized environments underfoot that were more than empty rock. In the Great Plains and mesas of North America, some Native American traditions speak of the ant people, a subterranean folk who emerged in certain legends as both protectors and teachers. These tales often arrive softly. Elders describe times of hardship when hidden allies guided lost travelers, or when healing knowledge came from the dark below. The imagery is intimate. Small dwellings under mounds, shared food passed through a low doorway, and a long memory of cooperation between those above and those below. For those who carried these stories forward, the people below were part of a larger cosmology, an acknowledgement that life and intelligence might occupy realms beneath the visible land. Far to the east, Buddhist and Hindu cosmologies hold the concept of Agartha or Shambhala, inner worlds of peace and profound wisdom, sometimes placed within mountain ranges or beneath the earth itself. In these accounts, the underground is not merely a refuge, it is a repository of sacred knowledge, a place where enlightened beings preserve teachings until humanity is ready to receive them. These legends are gentle in tone and full of instruction. They ask for humility and patience, and they frame the subsurface as a place where time itself moves differently. In Mesoamerica, stories of the underworld, Mictlan in the Aztec tradition, Xibalba for the Maya, build vivid, often somber landscapes beneath the earth. They describe layered realms, guardians, and paths that the living might travel in ritual or vision. Again, these narratives do many things at once. They provide moral instruction, explain cycles of death and rebirth, and remind people of the deep hidden places that shape life above. Across the ocean, in the green hills of Scotland and the rugged Isles, fey tunnels curl through folklore like dark ribbons. Travellers who stray into certain caves are sometimes said to be spirited away, returned with new knowledge or different in subtle ways. These tales warn of thresholds and bargains, and they contain a persistent theme, that the border between the world we see and the world beneath is available to cross, but crossing invites change. Legends carry weight because they are so often anchored in the lived experience of dangerous, uncanny places. When people, for thousands of years, pass down a warning about a certain cavern or a particular valley that hums, that warning is not random. It encodes repeated encounters with uncertainty. Over time, multiple cultural threads that speak of people below begin to form a pattern that deserves sober attention. Now, let us consider the archaeological echoes that can be read alongside these myths, the things that make a curious mind lean forward. Archaeology often reveals structures and artifacts that invite careful interpretation. There are underground cities and rock-cut temples, long human endeavours to make space within stone for ritual storage and shelter. Places like these show why underground life has always been practical. Stable temperatures, protection from weather, and the secrecy that comes with being out of sight. Think of the vast subterranean complexes that humans ourselves have built. Rooms stacked beneath temples, long tunnels carved over generations, underground granaries and hidden sanctuaries. These constructions reveal not only human ingenuity, but also a recognition that the underworld can be lived in and used. If human communities took to the subsoil for reasons of climate and safety, it is easy to see how other life forms might have found the same incentives attractive. The archaeological record shows us that the underground is habitable, adaptable, and meaningful. Some researchers and enthusiasts collect accounts of artifacts and sites that they find especially suggestive. Sealed chambers deep beneath abandoned mines, petroglyphs etched into cave walls showing figures that diverge from typical human proportions, or underground temples aligned to strange patterns of sound rather than light. These findings, when narrated in careful, methodical voices, become part of a layered argument. Imagine a sealed chamber discovered under an early mining town, its entrance carefully closed centuries ago and reopened by accident during a structural study. Inside, the chamber bears a frieze of elongated figures, hands raised toward a flow of painted lines that could represent water or song. The central floor shows cup-like depressions with faint traces of an unusual residue that resists standard chemical analysis. The archaeologists catalogue the site with professional restraint. They note what can be verified and what remains puzzling. Local oral histories speak of strange lights seen near the old mine in certain seasons, and ranchers tell of animals behaving oddly on those nights. The threads interweave myth, material, and modern observation. There are other archaeological details that feed the imagination. Consider petroglyphs that show beings rising from cave mouths, not always human in shape, sometimes bearing limbs in unfamiliar proportions. When such images appear in geographically and culturally distinct locations, they are not conclusive proof. They are patterns that invite inquiry. Some scholars caution that we must not impose modern categories on ancient art, and this admonition is wise. Yet if multiple cultures independently encode similar imagery, are people emerging from below, or spiritual guides beneath the land, it is fair to ask whether those cultures recorded shared experiences or perceptions of something underfoot. The discipline of archaeology trains us to be precise, but precision does not prevent curiosity. Archaeologists also find other sorts of anomalies. Ancient tunnels whose purpose is unclear, chambers built with acoustics that amplify low-frequency sound, and mineral residues in places that do not match expected trade patterns. Sometimes an artifact exhibits a composite of materials that are local and strange, a combination that suggests either long-distance trade or technology not yet explained. These are places where scholarly caution and imaginative inquiry meet. They are, in their own way, invitations to look deeper without leaping to sensational conclusions. I will tell you a story that blends careful description with an echo of the uncanny, a story that is representative of many oral histories filtered through archaeological curiosity. Many years ago, in a mountain region seldom visited by outsiders, a farmer discovered an entrance to a collapsed tunnel while tending a field. Elders in the nearby village told a measured tale. Decades earlier, miners had dug too greedily and found a hollow chamber that hummed at night. The miners closed the entrance and kept their distance, claiming that voices drifted up when they worked too late into the dark. The new collapse reopened the space, and local researchers were invited. Inside the partially collapsed tunnel, the team found wall markings unlike the usual miners' graffiti. They discovered shallow basins along the floor, each with a different pattern of scratches and a faint sheen on the rock that confounded the chemical team. The villagers, when asked, spoke of a particular night when lights moved under the hill like tiny stars. A shepherd child described shadows that kept their distance, watching from the edge of a fissure. The researchers documented what they could, noting environmental explanations, but they also recorded the stories, and these stories, repeated across generations, carry a persistent human weight. It is crucial to remember, in the calmest way, that myth does not equal proof. Legends are layered with symbolism, moral teaching, and the human tendency to anthropomorphize. Yet legends are also records of perception. When the same sort of perception appears in far-flung cultures, an awareness of a presence below, a set of rules around cave entrances, a recurring image of people beneath the earth, the pattern merits gentle, sustained inquiry. It is as if the human mind, attentive to danger and resource, kept folding away certain notes about the world into the shape of story. There are also ritual traditions that treat underground places as thresholds to knowledge. Initiation rites, vision quests, and pilgrimages often involve descending into symbolic darkness. Caves, pits, and crypts used to represent rebirth and revelation. This ritual language suggests that ancient people associated the subterranean with transformation and otherness. Whether or not they literally met another species below, they perceived power in the depths. That perception, over millennia, could encode both practical warnings and real encounters with phenomena that do not fit ordinary life. Blend into all this the archaeological whispers of unusual finds, objects turned up in collapsed shafts, with traces of organics that do not match expected species, inscriptions with geometric motifs that repeat in distant regions, and chambers carved not for storage, but for acoustic resonance. Each anomaly is small on its own, but when collected they produce a mosaic that calls for a nuanced response. Continue careful excavation, apply modern analytical techniques, and keep an open but critical mind. As we move toward the close of this chapter, imagine yourself walking the rim of a sinkhole at dusk. The air smells of cool stone and wet earth. Village lights blink at a distance, and in the silence you hear the slow call of an owl. In your hands you hold the echo of many voices, elders, archaeologists, miners, and the quiet hum of instruments. Together they compose a soft chorus that suggests the underground has long been part of our collective attention. Whether through myth, ritual, or material residue, people across time acknowledge that the world beneath us holds otherness, and they taught their children to treat it with care. Stay with this gentle curiosity as we turn next to the modern day, to eyewitness accounts near caves, mines, and tunnels, where contemporary observers have recorded encounters that echo ancient patterns. We will listen to those testimonies with the same calm carefulness we have used here, attentive to what can be verified and to what remains intriguingly unexplained. Chapter 3: The Hidden Cities Beneath Our Feet. The story of cryptoterrestrials becomes far more unsettling when the conversation shifts from isolated encounters to the possibility of entire civilizations operating below the surface of the Earth. Many cultures have ancient stories of vast underground realms, some describing them as places of refuge, others as domains ruled by non-human intelligences that predate humanity itself. When these legends are placed beside modern geological studies, unexplained military activity, and strange subterranean acoustic phenomena, a pattern begins to emerge, one suggesting that the underground world is far larger, far stranger, and far more populated than we have ever been told. The Earth crust is not a uniform, solid mass. It is a fractal network of caves, tunnels, lava tubes, deep chambers, and natural voids formed over hundreds of millions of years. Some of these chambers are big enough to fit entire skyscrapers, while others run like arteries beneath continents. Deep beneath the surface, temperatures rise and pressure mounts, yet the geological layers have pockets where conditions remain surprisingly stable and could, in theory, support life if that life adapted to the gloom. Scientists have long known that microbes can thrive miles underground, feeding on minerals, radiation, and chemical reactions instead of sunlight. If simple organisms can do this, then more complex life with intelligence, could evolve in similar conditions given enough time. And time is something the Earth has always had in abundance. Ancient texts from around the world tell remarkably consistent stories of underground dwellers. In Native American lore, tribes like the Hopi speak of the Ant People, beings who lived underground and helped humanity survive catastrophic events on the surface. Tibetan traditions refer to Shambhala, a hidden kingdom beneath the Himalayas, said to be inhabited by advanced beings who only reveal themselves during moments of great planetary change. Even early Christian mystics wrote about vast caverns under the earth, where strange luminous creatures moved silently through tunnels that seemed older than creation itself. Though mainstream scholars often dismiss these accounts as metaphors, the descriptions align too closely across cultures to be ignored. What is even more intriguing is that many of these stories include details describing advanced tools or strange lights, elements that ancient civilizations should not have had access to. For example, Roman historian Pliny the Elder once recorded an account of glowing objects that emerged from a cavern near the Mediterranean, objects that seemed to move with purpose and intelligence before retreating back into the earth. Similar reports appear sporadically through medieval texts, where peasants described glowing humanoid figures with pale skin emerging from wells or deep forest sinkholes before vanishing into the ground. In these records, the beings sometimes communicated, though often wordlessly, using gestures or telepathic impressions that left witnesses confused but convinced they had encountered something otherworldly. In modern times, things become even more intriguing. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union developed subterranean listening stations, massive arrays designed to detect nuclear tests and seismic activity. Over the decades, operators in these facilities repeatedly detected rhythmic, intelligent-sounding acoustic signatures from deep underground. These signals did not match earthquakes, mining operations, or any known natural process. Some resembled machinery. Others seemed almost biological, like whale songs echoing through stone. Internal memos suggest that intelligence agencies quietly investigated these anomalies, hypothesizing the existence of unknown subterranean activity. Many such documents remain classified or heavily redacted, but enough has surfaced to indicate that governments have long been aware of something living or moving below. Strange military behavior also fuels speculation. In several remote regions, including deserts, mountain ranges, and polar territories, governments have established restricted zones far larger than necessary for conventional operations. These areas often correspond to regions where major cave networks or deep geological faults exist. Witnesses, including hikers and local residents, have reported hearing deep rumbling noises that seem too constant and rhythmic to be natural. Others describe seeing aircraft repeatedly circling the same isolated valleys where there are no official bases, as if monitoring something beneath the terrain. In some cases, entire areas have been quietly evacuated without public explanation, leaving only cryptic statements about unstable ground or unusual geophysical activity. This raises the question, what exactly are they watching? There are countless rumors of underground entrances discovered by accident, mining shafts that suddenly opened into impossibly smooth tunnels, spelunkers who reported brief encounters with pale humanoid shapes, watching them from the dark, and construction crews who came across metallic structures embedded deep beneath the rock. One of the most chilling stories comes from a team of geologists who, while drilling in a remote region, captured audio of distant voices hundreds of meters below. The recording, which circulated quietly among academic circles for decades, featured what sounded like coordinated speech, though in a language no one recognized. Some thought it was a hoax. Others believed it was proof that something intelligent dwells far beneath us. Even more disturbing are the accounts of people who went missing near deep cave systems, only for search teams to find bizarre evidence. Footprints with elongated toes, small triangular burn marks on cave walls, or tunnels that appear to have been carved by tools. Not human tools, but something more precise, as if the rock had been shaped by heat or energy rather than chisels. Environmental monitoring sensors in some regions have picked up bursts of electromagnetic activity underground that resemble the signatures emitted by advanced technology. These bursts often precede sightings of strange lights in the sky, leading some to believe that these underground dwellers may have craft capable of emerging through hidden openings and rising silently into the air. This possibility ties directly into modern UFO reports, many of which describe objects disappearing into mountainsides, diving into the ocean, or hovering above remote canyons before dropping straight down as if entering a concealed shaft. The idea becomes even more compelling when considering volcanic and geothermal regions. Many UFO sightings cluster around areas with deep magma chambers, suggesting these locations may serve as energy sources for underground civilizations. Some researchers speculate that cryptoterrestrials have developed ways to harness geothermal or electromagnetic energy on a scale beyond human capability. If so, the Earth would be an ideal habitat for them, not a prison of darkness, but a vast labyrinth illuminated by bioluminescent structures, glowing mineral formations, or technology that we cannot yet comprehend. And then there are the whispers about the deep facilities, massive underground structures supposedly built by governments but possibly co-inhabited or accessed by cryptoterrestrials. Former military personnel have spoken, sometimes anonymously, about encountering non-human beings in restricted tunnels or seeing sealed doors leading into passages that military forces were forbidden to enter. Some even claimed that high-level officials maintain quiet diplomatic arrangements with underground civilizations, viewing them not as threats, but as ancient neighbors whose presence must remain hidden to prevent societal collapse. Whether these accounts are myth, misinterpretation, or fragments of a truth we're not yet ready to face, they all point toward one unsettling conclusion: the world beneath our feet is not empty. It is alive, active, and possibly inhabited by beings who have developed in parallel with us yet remain unseen. They might be more advanced technologically, more adapted biologically, and far more invested in secrecy than any extraterrestrial visitor. After all, they would not be arriving from distant stars, they would simply be emerging from below, from a realm they have likely occupied for millions of years. If cryptoterrestrials truly exist, then humanity has been sharing the planet with an unseen civilization that knows our weaknesses, our patterns, and our history far better than we know theirs. And for reasons unknown, they have chosen to remain hidden, at least for now. Chapter 4: Modern Encounters. Near caves, mines, and tunnels, eyewitnesses speak. Beneath an unremarkable ridge, inside abandoned shafts, along the rim of a flooded sinkhole, modern people continue to report encounters that echo the old stories while adding details only a technologically observant era could record. These reports arrive in many forms, a miner pausing mid-shift to describe a pale figure that watched from a shadowed niche, a spelunker coming out of the dark with a memory of low, patterned tones that set their teeth on edge. A survey team finding equipment miscalibrated after descending into a chamber where the air itself seemed to hum. When woven together, such accounts create a tapestry of experience that is at once human and strange, practical and uncanny. They do not force a single interpretation, but they do demand to be heard with attention. Consider the kinds of places where these encounters most frequently occur. Caves whose mouths yawn in limestone regions, the labyrinthine passages of old mines cut by generations of hands, the service tunnels that braid beneath cities, and the submerged caverns that diverge beneath the lakes and continental shelves. These are places where human presence is intermittent and often limited to those who work there. Miners, spelunkers, hydrogeologists, surveyors, salvage divers. Such people are by profession careful observers. Their lives depend on noticing what is normal and what is not. When they report something out of the ordinary, their testimony is typically precise and laden with technical detail. The approximate depth, the sound frequency range, the temperature gradient, the behavior of their instruments, and the sequence of events leading up to the sighting. That level of specificity is what makes many of these accounts persist in the margins of professional literature and in the quieter exchanges of field teams. Some stories begin simply: a foreman calls for a temporary halt because workers complain of a low-frequency vibration that none of the machinery produces. Others begin with direct visual contact. A miner steps into a chamber and sees, in the pool of his helmet light, a smooth, pale form perched on a ledge, watching calmly before slipping soundlessly into a passage too narrow for a human to follow. There are accounts of reflective eyes, not the round pupils we expect, but a mirror-like surface that catches and returns light in strange ways, as if the eyes are lenses tuned to a different bandwidth. Those who report such views often describe a rapid, animal-level calm. The being does not rush forward or flee. It regards and then disappears with a movement that suggests either familiarity with the passageways or an ability to deform its shape to fit jagged rock. Some of the most resonant modern tales come from places where small communities live alongside mines and caves, where the landscape holds memories of extraction and concealment. In a remote mining town, a veteran miner might tell of a night shift when his lamp caught a shape kneeling in a tunnel, its skin like wet stone and its hands long and dexterous. He would describe the smell in the air, not the acidic tang of explosives, but a faint metallic odour, like rain on hot metal. He would describe how his instruments registered an electromagnetic spike that saturated his radios and collapsed GPS signal for angles of seconds. He would explain plainly that he has seen things underground his whole life, but this was different, precise, watchful, as if whatever it was had a purpose beyond mere curiosity. Across cultures, stories repeat similar motifs. Animals behaving oddly before an event, sensory disorientation among people who enter certain caverns, and subtle, repeated patterns of sound recorded by monitoring equipment. In some cases, researchers have gathered corroborating sensor data. Geophones picking up rhythmic impacts in a sequence that does not fit known mining activity. Thermal cameras showing a transient glow that sweeps a cave wall and then fades, and sonar returns from underwater passages that show objects moving with purposeful arcs, even when no known vehicle was operating. These technical details anchor eyewitness accounts, giving them an empirical scaffold without robbing them of mystery. One widely circulated narrative concerns a well-documented cave system, where multiple independent visitors reported seeing shadowy, humanoid forms at different times over several years. Local scientists initially attributed the sightings to misperceived rock formations and the play of light, yet the cluster of reports included moments when witnesses recorded audio or video. some footage, grainy and partial, captures movement. A slender limb sliding behind a stalagmite. A suggestion of a torso that does not match human proportions. Specialists analysed the recordings and noted anomalies. A cadence in the movement that lacked the biomechanics of known terrestrial animals. A timing inconsistent with water currents or falling debris. The skeptics argued for pareidolia and optical illusions. Others, listening to recorded low-frequency components, suggested an intelligent origin for the sound signatures. The truth remained contested, but the multiplicity of accounts, from experienced cavers who could not be easily dismissed, urged further inquiry. Another class of encounters involves what happens when modern technology enters the deep. Survey teams using ground-penetrating radar and borehole sonars occasionally detect voids that conventional models do not predict. Small, geometric cavities, corridors seemingly cut with a precision that stands out from random karst formation. In a handful of cases, drilling logs note brief, localized changes in resistance and temperature that force teams to halt operations. Once, a remote-operated vehicle deployed into a flooded shaft recorded faint, high-order acoustic signals before its feed cut out. The file, when reviewed, contained a pattern of clicks and modulated frequencies arranged in repeats, not random noise but a structured sequence. Linguists and bioacousticians considered whether the pattern bore hallmarks of information-bearing signals. Some proposed that such sequences could be territorial calls of an unknown species. Others raised the possibility of deliberate signaling tuned to the sensors themselves. Again, the data did not yield a definitive solution, but it expanded the palette of what needs consideration. Stories that combine human drama and technical anomaly tend to hold attention longer. A rescue operation that turned into an encounter is a case in point. Teams responding to a missing hiker near a cave system found personal items in a pattern inconsistent with a simple accidental fall. Clothes laid neatly, personal effects placed in a small alcove, and footprints that transitioned from human to smaller webbed impressions leading into a passage that narrowed too much for normal human entry. Rescue divers who descended into an adjacent submerged tunnel reported seeing a faint phosphorescent glow ahead, a diffuse light without an obvious source, and the sensation of being observed. They surfaced shaken, reporting a pressure change in the tunnel that their instruments could not explain. Such accounts are rare and often filtered through the discretion of official agencies, but they persist as narratives among communities close to the land. Conspiracy lore has a penchant for amplifying these threads. Stories of clandestine bases and forbidden research sites, Dulce Base and its many variations among them, fuse the subterranean hypothesis with governmental secrecy. While much of this lore is sensational and lacks verifiable evidence, some aspects are grounded in documented facts. Governments do maintain secure underground facilities for legitimate reasons, from missile silos to data repositories. These facilities produce restricted airspace and restricted narratives, which in turn allow rumour to flourish. What is important for our calm inquiry is to separate verifiable infrastructure from speculative extensions. Restricted zones create an ecological niche for secrecy, and secrecy breeds stories. Within those stories often lie kernels of observation, reports of vehicles entering mountains, sudden roadblocks near cave mouths, and unusual sensor readings logged by otherwise routine monitoring. Public interest spikes when mainstream witnesses add weight to the narrative. Pilots, for example, have occasionally reported objects moving near mountain ranges in ways inconsistent with known aerodynamics, near vertical dives that end with the object vanishing into a mountain slope, or luminous disks that hover above a plane and then drop below the horizon as if entering an aperture. Military pilots trained to identify foreign aircraft and natural phenomena sometimes file reports that remain redacted in public records. The interplay of aerial observations with terrestrial cave reports creates a bridge. If an object disappears into the ground from above, it implies access to subterranean spaces that are not accounted for on maps and databases. That possibility compels a deeper look at the networks of passages we have not yet fully charted. There are quieter, more human encounters that touch the psychological edges of this topic. People who live near caves or abandoned mines sometimes report dreams that mirror local subterranean imagery. Corridors lined with pale figures, a deep voice calling from below, or the sensation of being guided through a maze. While dreams are not evidence, their recurrence in communities with a long history of underground activity is noteworthy. Dreams and folklore are part of a cultural ecosystem. They shape how people interpret ambiguous sensory data. When a shepherd enters a hollow and hears a tone that a neighbour recognises from a dream, the event gains social weight and begins to form into a consistent pattern of perception shared across individuals. Eyewitness testimony can be both compelling and problematic. Human perception is fallible and memory is porous. Yet when testimonies converge in technical detail, repeated reports of a particular low-frequency modulation, consistent descriptions of reflective ocular surfaces under helmet light, correlated electromagnetic interference across independent instruments, the convergence becomes meaningful. It justifies an investigative approach that is rigorous, patient, and open to multiple hypotheses. Scientists prefer to chase testable predictions. If a pattern exists, can independent teams reproduce it under controlled conditions? Can we place instruments near reported sites to gather long-term data? Such logistical questions are practical and calming. They move us from anecdote toward evidence. In some documented cases where long-term monitoring occurred, data collection revealed periodicities, low pulses recurring on a seasonal cycle that correlated with animal migrations and odd changes in local groundwater chemistry. In other cases, no simple correlation held, suggesting either an irregular agent or a complex interplay of environmental variables. Engineers and biologists analysing these datasets often emphasise a cautious stance. Correlation is not causation, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That admonition is wise and should be the bedrock of any investigation. Yet caution need not equal dismissal. It can be the steady hand that sorts phenomena into known classes and truly novel effects. There are also incidents where encounters escalated into visible change. Cave walls scraped in patterns not consistent with human tools, mineral deposits altered over short timescales, and small structural rearrangements in loose stone that imply the movement of something with an ability to manipulate its environment. Some field teams report finding areas of polished stone in otherwise rough tunnels, with grooves that suggest repeated passage of appendages or tools. Chemical analysis occasionally reveals residue that does not match expected species or industrial contaminants. These are small, fragmentary hints, not proofs, but they are precisely the sorts of details that accumulate into a picture if followed with meticulous care. As we move toward the end of this chapter, it is important to hold two things at once. First, the humility of scientific method, which requires that claims be testable and replicable. And second, the recognition that many earnest, trained observers have reported anomalies in subterranean contexts that resist simple explanation. The combination of human testimony and instrument data, when both point in the same direction, becomes more than folklore. It becomes an opening for further inquiry. In the chapters ahead, we'll examine the pattern of disappearances that cluster around subterranean regions, the physical evidence of subsurface structures that blur the line between natural and engineered, and the whispers from inside classified projects that hint at a deeper story. We will keep our tone calm and our curiosity patient, allowing evidence to lead us forward without forcing conclusions. The underground is a place of slow transformations and subtle signals. To understand it, we must move with equal patience and sensitivity. Chapter 5: The Missing 411 Pattern. Why disappearances cluster around cave regions. There is a hush that falls over search and rescue briefings when certain words are spoken. Cave, sinkhole, cast, collapse. Those words carry a practical danger: unstable ground, hidden water, air pockets. But they also carry a quieter, more unnerving weight. Patterns that do not sit neatly inside expected explanations. Over the last several decades, investigators, rangers, and families have noticed clusters of disappearances in particular landscapes: national parks, sprawling cave networks, and regions of complex subterranean geology. Some of these clusters have been gathered under the shorthand Missing 411, a term that points not to a single cause but to a statistical concentration of unexplained vanishings that resist easy categorization. To understand why these cases attract attention, we must begin with the mechanics of a search in broken terrain. Search teams arrive with maps, drones, canine units, grid patterns, and a practiced calm. They map likely routes, check water sources, and listen for any movement. In many instances, the missing person is found within a predictable radius: a fall in a ravine, hypothermia after a night exposed, or misadventure while following a faint trail. These are the ordinary, solvable tragedies to which brave people respond each year. But a subset of cases refuses those tidy endings. In these instances, the person is not found where logic suggests they should be. Their belongings sometimes appear in odd locations, and the environmental data shows anomalies that complicate every hypothesis. One repeated pattern is geographical clustering. Certain parks and reserves, especially those with karst landscapes, flooded caves, and complex subterranean drainage, show a higher incidence of unexplained disappearances than their visitation rates would predict. These places are not always the most remote. Many are popular hiking destinations. Their commonality is not only in their capacity to hide a person physically, but in the way their subterranean systems connect distant surface points via invisible passages. Water flows underground in ways that confound surface intuition. A fissure swallowed at one site may re-emerge miles away as a seep, and caverns can run like hidden thoroughfares under entire ridges. For a person who falls or is drawn into such a system, conventional search models may fail to account for subterranean transport mechanisms. Another motif that repeatedly surfaces in these cases is instrument and equipment anomalies at the time of disappearance. Search teams report moments when GPS devices jitter or lose lock within a small area, when radio transmitters fail inexplicably, and when camera recordings show bands of electromagnetic interference. These are not frequent, and they are seldom recorded in controlled experiments, but when they appear in field logs contemporaneous with disappearances, they become part of the puzzle. Experienced rangers learn to take note of those small failures. Electronics do fail in the wild, but their synchronized collapse across multiple teams raises questions worth careful, patient investigation. Closely tied to these technical oddities is the recurring discovery, in some cases, of clothing or personal items placed in ways that suggest order, not panic. Searchers describe finding socks folded on a ledge, a jacket arranged neatly atop a boulder, or a backpack open and its contents stacked like notes on a table. These details are rare, but when they appear in multiple, independent reports, they are hard to dismiss as coincidence. Could environmental actors, water or animals, just create such order? It seems unlikely. Could human behavior explain it? In certain psychological conditions, some people do arrange personal effects. Yet in many instances, the person found wanted or judged to be capable of using survival strategies is not the sort to do this. The pattern, whatever its cause, nudges investigators toward considering alternative scenarios. Wilderness witnesses sometimes offer testimony that adds a human and unsettling dimension. Hikers near a vanished person might report a sudden drop in temperature, a ringing in their ears, and then a disorienting blankness in memory for a few minutes. Others recall seeing lights moving below a ridge in shapes that did not match any known vehicle, or hearing a low, regular hum around the time someone went missing. Animal behavior is frequently noted. Dogs refusing to enter a particular hollow, birds falling silent over a valley, or livestock acting agitated without obvious cause. Such sensory shapes, lack of memory, acoustic anomalies, and animal disquiet do not prove intervention, but they are consistent details worth cataloguing. There are also tales of paths that seem to rearrange. Hikers following a well-trodden track report that a narrow offshoot appears where none existed the day before, or that a sinkhole opens with astonishing speed in a seemingly stable slope. People who work in cave systems tell of passages that narrow or widen inexplicably over time, of ceilings that shed dust and small stones in rhythmic patterns, and of subtle drafts that never seem to follow simple thermodynamic rules. To an investigator trained in geological processes, these phenomena can often be modelled. To the communities affected by loss, however, they are experienced as the onset of a different order of things, as if the landscape periodically reveals aspects of a hidden architecture. Psychology and sociology explain much of how these cases are perceived. Families and communities want closure. They want a tidy narrative with a cause and a grave. When the evidence resists such closure, rumour and hypothesis rush in to fill the gap. That is human and understandable. The prudent investigator, however, maintains methodical curiosity. Each case deserves three kinds of attention: the immediate physical search, careful forensic documentation of the scene and environment, and the long-term patient pattern analysis that aggregates many incidents to see whether statistical anomalies point toward a common agent or set of conditions. Within that careful framework, some researchers see a pattern consistent with the presence of a non-surface actor, an agent capable of moving people into subterranean spaces with an economy of effort and without leaving overt traces. Proponents of this interpretation point to several recurrent clues: the ordered placement of belongings, the absence of typical signs of struggle, the presence of small, unusually smooth foot impressions in soft sediment, and electromagnetic disturbances concurrent with disappearances. They note too that some victims later reappeared under baffling circumstances, hours or days away from their initial last known position, sometimes with partial amnesia and an unusual calm about what had happened to them. The narratives in these cases bear a common thread: an encounter with a presence that is not violent in the human sense, but which removes and relocates with purpose. Skeptics have reasonable counterpoints. Cave systems are efficient at relocating organic material. Floods and subterranean water flows can transport clothing and bodies far from a collapse site. Animal scavengers rearrange objects, and the human brain is adept at finding patterns in randomness. Memory lapses can be explained by shock, hypothermia, or traumatic amnesia. Each of these explanations has evidentiary support in many cases, and indeed they fit the majority of disappearances. The challenge is that a stubborn minority of cases resist all conventional explanations even after exhaustive forensic and environmental analysis. One particularly evocative set of cases involves individuals who returned after an absence, describing experiences that do not fit known psychological or physiological models. In a few reports, returnees describe being in a place with a light not quite like sunlight, diffused, cool, and shifting in hue, where they felt attended to rather than attacked. They have spoken of slow, patient beings who communicated through tones or images rather than words, who guided them through cavern passages, and who then allowed them to re-emerge under conditions that were not easily explained by simple geography. Medical exams sometimes show traces of unusual mineral residues or skin irritants, and yet comprehensive toxicology and pathology fail to yield a clear cause. These stories sit at the boundary between the medical and the mythic, and they are often treated with guarded interest by those involved. The involvement of search dogs adds another technical angle. Dogs are sensitive to scent trails and to residual human scent that persists even through underground water. In some cases, canines alerted to a direction and then hesitated at a certain boundary, backing away from an opening or refusing to descend. Trainers and handlers have reported that dogs sometimes track to peculiar places, a dry fissure, a narrowed slot, and then act as if sensing something beyond human perception. Animal behavior is not proof of an intelligent actor, yet the repetition of these canine responses in multiple independent cases is an intriguing data point, begging for controlled study. Forensic anomalies deepen the puzzle. In several instances where remains were eventually found, the pattern of soft tissue damage differed from what would be expected from predation or environmental decay. There are reports of bone surfaces that appear polished in a localized way, or of organic matter that shows signs of unusual mineralization consistent with exposure to chemical environments not typically found in the region. Again, these findings are not common, but their presence complicates a neat narrative. Are these the result of long-term exposure to geothermal microenvironments? Are they signs of a biological process visiting the remains? Or are they artifacts of taphonomic processes we do not fully model? Each option requires patient technical inquiry. Search teams sometimes confront logistical obstacles that exacerbate the mystery. In several disappearances, authorities have cordoned off areas citing unstable ground or hazardous conditions, thereby limiting the initial search window. While safety is paramount and should never be sacrificed, those constraints sometimes mean that vital early evidence is lost to weather or to time. Small details degrade quickly in the wild. The direction of a footprint, the presence of a faint drag mark, or the sequence of small stones displaced along a path. The loss of this micro-evidence makes later reconstructions ambiguous. This is an operational reality that investigators counter with rapid response protocols, but it remains a complicating factor in many puzzling cases. Conspiracy narratives blossom in the vacuum left by undetermined outcomes. Tales of covert operations, of underground bases, and of agencies that quietly remove witnesses gain traction when families sense obfuscation. Such narratives are often fueled by the secrecy that naturally surrounds some facilities, and by the understandable human reluctance of agencies to share unverified speculation. Responsible investigators communicate within the limits of what they can verify, and they resist both sensationalism and premature closure. But the absence of public transparency in some spaces, for reasons of national security or safety, does create a fertile environment for rumour. It is here, in the sensitive overlap between legitimate secrecy and public curiosity, that a subtle, persistent anxiety grows. At the same time, technologies for monitoring and mapping have advanced in ways that invite hope. Ground-penetrating radar, long baseline seismometers, biosensors, and environmental DNA sampling provide tools to test hypotheses about subterranean presence. Long-term deployments of multispectral cameras and sensitive microphones in high-risk zones can capture data without human presence, removing some of the uncertainties introduced by on-site teams. In a few carefully run studies, teams have deployed arrays of instruments around known cave entrances and sinkhole zones to create a multi-year record of electromagnetic, acoustic, thermal, and chemical flux. Those long datasets sometimes reveal periodicities, slow pulses or seasonal fluctuations that correlate with increased reports of anomalous observations. Correlation does not certify causation, but it does make the case for further, disciplined study. We must not forget the human cost. Families of the missing live with a daily quiet pressure, the not knowing pressurized into a life of questions. Communities near these landscapes change their behaviors. Parents insist on tracking devices and radios, groups hike in larger numbers, and local law shifts to include warnings about certain hollows. These social consequences are profound. Fear reshapes paths and markets adapt. Guided tours reroute. Equipment rental companies sell more beacons and emergency kits, and the narratives of a landscape become as much about safety as they are about beauty. If one wishes to take the hypothesis of a non-surface actor seriously, the prudent path is not sensationalism but method. Place long-term instruments, model water flows and subterranean transport paths. Deploy teams trained in cave forensics. Analyze any discovered residues with the best available labs, and always compare findings against the broader set of natural explanations. The scientific posture that best serves this work combines skepticism, patience, and the creative rigor to frame testable predictions. There is another quiet human angle that often escapes purely technical accounts: the way survivors and returnees speak afterward. Those who come back sometimes show subtle changes in perception, a different tolerance for bright light, a new preference for silence, an altered sense of time. These behavioral shifts are soft clues, not hard evidence, but they are part of the pattern mosaic. Psychologists and anthropologists who approach such cases with empathy note that narrative framing matters. If a returnee is told they had a hallucination, they may internalize it. If they are met with openness, their testimony expands. The scientific community benefits from respectful listening coupled with rigorous testing. As we ease toward the closing of this chapter, imagine the slow, patient work required to address the missing 411 pattern responsibly. It is work of long nights in command tents, of data files opened and reopened, of careful cross-referencing between environmental records and witness statements. It is also work of compassion, holding families' questions with steadiness and resolving to let patterns guide inquiry rather than fear. If some of these cases ultimately yield natural explanations, we will have learned about our planet's complex systems. If some resist explanation, and if further evidence points toward intelligent subterranean actors, then the implications would be enormous, ethically, sociologically, and practically. It would mean recalibrating how we think about habitat, intelligence, and the borders of our world. In the next chapter, we will examine the physical evidence of subsurface structures themselves, how natural caverns and engineered tunnels might be distinguished, the surprising scale of lava tubes and karst systems, and the kinds of artifacts and anomalies that prompt questions about whether something beneath the crust is natural or made. We will move from pattern into materiality, letting the tangible traces lead our calm investigation forward. Chapter 6. Evidence of subsurface structures, natural or engineered. Beneath the surface, stone tells a long story in layers, in the grain of sediment and in the slow geometry of voids. When we try to tell whether a subterranean space is the product of pure geology or of something that shaped stone with intention, the work is patient and methodical. It combines field observation, remote sensing, material science, and a long discipline of comparative pattern recognition. The difference between a natural cavern and an engineered corridor is often subtle at first. A curve that hints at purpose, a repetition that feels deliberate, a mineral sheen that does not fit the local chemistry. and yet over time those subtle cues gather into a persuasive whole. In this chapter, we will move carefully through the toolkit used by researchers to distinguish natural from artificial subsurface structures, describing the techniques, the telltale signatures, the ambiguities, and the kinds of anomalies that invite closer attention. We will also look at the sorts of physical evidence that could point toward an intelligence shaping the deep, and how scientists and field teams conduct that difficult, quiet sorting. Begin with scale and morphology. Natural caves form through processes we can observe and model. Water-dissolving limestone in karst regions, lava flowing and cooling to leave tubes, glaciers grinding channels into rock, and the slow widening of fractures along fault lines. These processes leave characteristic forms, sinuous passages, scalloped walls shaped by flowing water, stalactites and stalagmites built drop by patient drop, and mineral layering that mirrors episodic wet and dry cycles. Engineered or engineered seeming spaces, by contrast, tend to show patterns of regularity. Straight corridors that maintain a consistent cross-section for long distances, angled joints that repeat at intervals, and surfaces that exhibit tool marks or polished planes inconsistent with karst dissolution. In practice, however, the divide is not absolute. Geological processes can create surprisingly regular forms under the right conditions. Lava tubes can be remarkably straight for their length, and water can polish a wall until it appears smoothed by intent. Thus, morphology is the first clue, not the final verdict. To move from morphology to evidence, researchers deploy a suite of remote sensing tools. Ground-penetrating radar gives a cross-sectional sketch of subsurface density contrasts, revealing voids and the approximate shape of cavities. Seismic reflection and refraction techniques map deeper interfaces by using controlled pulses and analyzing their echoes. Magnetometry detects anomalies in the magnetic field that can indicate metal or remnant magnetization from ancient fires or manufactured objects. Gravimetric surveys measure minor changes in gravity to infer mass deficits consistent with voids. Recently, muon tomography, using cosmic ray muons that penetrate rock and are absorbed at different rates, has emerged as a powerful, non-invasive way to image dense structures and voids at depths unattainable by other shallow methods. Each method has strengths and limitations. Together they provide cross-validation and a clearer picture of whether a cavity's shape and composition look like the handiwork of geology alone. Where the subtlety deepens is in the material evidence recovered from boreholes, cores, and accessible chambers. Drill cores are precious. They are the linear history of rock, mineral, and organic traces. In ordinary karst cores, one expects to see alternating layers consistent with sedimentation tables, calcite deposits, and occasional organic detritus carried in by water. Anomalies take the form of unexpected inclusions, a discrete layer of metallic microbeads in a depth where no known industrial contamination occurred, a thin film of vitrified glass in a palimpsest of limestone, small fragments of a composite material that does not match the local bedrock. In careful lab analysis, microscopy, X-ray diffraction, mass spectrometry, isotopic ratio testing, these inclusions either find explanations within known processes or they remain stubbornly exceptional. It is the exceptional traces that call for expanded inquiry. Isotopic analysis is a particularly telling tool. Natural mineral formation follows isotopic fractionation patterns related to temperature and source reservoirs. Metals and organics produced by biological activity have isotope ratios consistent with known metabolisms. Engineered or otherwise unusual materials can carry isotopic signatures that sit outside expected ranges. A heavier than expected ratio of a certain element, or a compound bearing isotopes consistent with processes not known to occur in situ. When drill cores yield mineral assemblages whose isotopic signatures mismatch regional geology, scientists pay attention. Again, not every mismatch implies non-natural origin. Hydrothermal fluids, long-distance transport, or human contamination are plausible alternatives. The investigation narrows by systematically ruling these out. Another set of clues comes from surface microfeatures. Natural speleothems grow in layered, often dendritic patterns. They host trace inclusions from water chemistry that builds them up over millennia. In a chamber that suggests engineering, one might find repeatable striations aligned at uniform intervals, grooves that betray tool-assisted abrasion, or polished planes that show wear inconsistent with slow water flow. Microscopic examination of such marks reveals whether they are the product of mechanical abrasion with particular grain sizes, thermal treatment, or even biological etching. High magnification imaging and surface chemistry can reveal residues, oily films, trace organics with non-local signatures, or microtraces of alloys. Laboratory sequencing of organic residues sometimes yields unusual results. Fragments of protein-like chains that resist classification by current databases, or microbial communities whose DNA points to lineages unusual for the sample depth. These biological oddities can be a crucial part of the puzzle, especially when found in combination with anomalous mineral traces. Acoustics and echo signatures are another revealing domain. Natural cavities have characteristic reverberation patterns shaped by irregular walls and branching passages. Engineered tunnels, if they exist, may be designed with deliberate acoustics, chambers tuned to amplify low-frequency waves, corridors whose cross-section supports standing waves at specific intervals, or surfaces that absorb or reflect sound in ways not typical of simple dissolution caves. Researchers deploy impulse response measurements, small controlled sounds and the recording of their echoes, to map the cavity's resonant modes. Unusual resonant peaks or modulation in echoes that suggest internal structural regularity raise questions. In a few field scenarios, teams have recorded modulated low-frequency patterns that persist over time, the sort of signal that might be either geological oscillation or the byproduct of something with repeated internal geometry. Thermal and electromagnetic surveys add further layers. Thermal imaging can show heat sinks and sources that do not align with known geothermal gradients. A cavity that maintains a warm corridor in otherwise cool bedrock might be being heated from within, whether by biological metabolism, chemical reactions, or mechanical activity. Electromagnetic anomalies recorded by magnetotelluric arrays or broadband receivers can indicate currents, conductive deposits, or energetic phenomena. Some teams report transient EM bursts deep underground that coincide with other anomalies, such as sudden drops in borehole temperatures, or the appearance of small, localized luminous events. Where such correlations appear repeatedly in the same region, the pattern moves from curiosity to a line of evidence worth following. Yet the most persuasive indicators of non-natural modification are contextually relational. If a void possesses a geometry that repeats across an area in ways inconsistent with the underlying geology, for instance, right-angled nodes repeating in a field of otherwise chaotic karst, then the pattern becomes suggestive. If the cavity walls show engineered modularity, such as regular niches at measured intervals, paired apertures repeating in symmetric arrays, or conduits organized like distribution networks, those attributes point away from purely random geological formation. Researchers perform spatial statistical analyses to quantify regularity, fractal dimension metrics, Fourier analysis of spatial periodicities, and comparison to Monte Carlo simulations of naturally generated cave morphologies. When statistical analysis shows a low probability that the observed regularities result from chance geological processes, the case for deliberate shaping strengthens. It is also useful to consider what an engineered or engineered-seeming subterranean environment would require and how it would manifest. Engineering at depth, without access to sunlight, implies energy budgets, material transport, and waste handling. Any persistent subterranean economy must either harness local geothermal or chemical energy, recycle internal resources with extreme efficiency, or access the surface discreetly. Evidence for any of these strategies could be telling: concentrated mineral deposits showing signs of extraction, microstrata of biogenic waste altered in specific layers, or small shafts that break to the surface in remote locations. Observations of polished tracks leading into narrow fissures, layers of mineral accretion organized like shelves, or repeated placement of small, purpose-shaped objects in niches might all fit a pattern of usage and logistical design. We must take care to distinguish between anomalies that point to intelligence and anomalies that point to unknown but natural geophysical processes. The Earth continues to surprise scientists with processes once unknown. Novel types of mineralization, previously unobserved microbial metabolisms that precipitate unusual minerals, and transient hydrothermal flows that appear and vanish over decades. Rigorous science honors this possibility by exhausting natural explanations before invoking agency. A proper protocol includes long-term monitoring, repeated sampling, independent replication of findings, and the transparent archiving of raw data for peer scrutiny. Only after this careful sieve should one shift the balance toward hypotheses involving directed modification or habitation. In practice, some investigations encounter a mix: ordinary geological features overlaid with a handful of anomalous traces that do not readily fit known models. In these cases, the responsible approach is not sensational proclamation but layered inquiry. Expand monitoring arrays, bring in specialists in materials science and microbiology, conduct isotopic and elemental mapping, and image the voids with multiple independent sensing modalities. If satellite thermal imagery shows migrating heat pulses over a ridge, and if muon tomography simultaneously reveals a recurring void with regular geometry, and if borehole cores from that void produce trace organics not consistent with the local biosphere, then you have a convergent suite of evidence that warrants deeper, carefully staged investigation. Let us imagine for a moment a scenario that quietly stitches together these diverse signals. A remote mountain range yields a muon tomography map showing a sizable, rectilinear cavity beneath a ridge. Ground-penetrating radar aligns with the muon map, sketching corridors that cut at consistent angles. Thermal imaging shows a corridor of warmth shifting slowly along one axis, and magnetic surveys detect slight remnant magnetization in certain wall bands. Borehole cores taken in a grid reveal layers containing microbe communities with odd genetic markers, thin films of metalloid residue, and surface striations under microscopy that indicate abrasion with a uniform grit size. Acoustic surveys detect persistent low-frequency resonances with narrow spectral peaks. Each of these observations alone might be explainable. Together they create a mosaic that is difficult to dismiss. The proper response is not panic, but a methodical series of follow-ups. Expanded mapping, contamination controls, long-term environmental sampling, and the slow, patient accumulation of confirmatory data. This is how science approaches the borderline of the known and the unknown, with instruments tuned to the faintest signal, with protocols designed to separate local contamination from global patterns, and with a humility that recognizes both the creativity of nature and the possibility of hidden agency. The underground is a place where time moves differently, and where sparse, patient evidence ultimately yields truth. For those who listen closely, stone speaks in many voices. Our task is to learn its grammar. Chapter 7: The Theory of Cryptoterrestrials, Who They Are and Why They Hide. Imagine for a long, slow moment a line of life that veered away from the surface and took refuge in the vast dark. Not an invader from the stars, but a branch of Earth's own life tree that adapted to a world of stone, pressure, and the slow hum of geologic time. To speak of cryptoterrestrials in this way is to anchor the hypothesis in evolutionary logic. Life finds energy in many forms, and when a niche is stable and rich enough, complexity tends to follow. If such beings exist, their morphology, culture, and motives would be shaped by a subterranean ecology very different from ours, and by a long history of isolation, resource constraints, and selective pressures that favour stealth, economy, and subtlety over spectacle. In this chapter, we will consider those adaptive possibilities in depth, painting a picture that is simultaneously plausible and richly detailed. A portrait of intelligence evolved underground, and the reasons such intelligence might choose to remain hidden. We will combine comparative biology, plausible technology, behavioral ecology, and human eyewitness threads to construct a consistent patient hypothesis of who cryptoterrestrials might be and what they might want. First, consider their likely physiology. In darkness, eyesight becomes less useful. Energy that would be allocated to visual systems is often reallocated to other sensory modalities. Many cave-dwelling species on the surface show predictable adaptations: reduced or absent eyes, enhanced tactile sensors, sensitive mechanoreceptors, and chemosensory systems that can detect minute chemical gradients in water or air. Extrapolate these patterns to an intelligent organism and imagine a creature whose primary senses are pressure detection, low-frequency hearing, vibration mapping, and a chemosensory network capable of reading subtle mineral or organic traces in the air. Their appendages might be long and dexterous, capable of manipulating delicate structures and navigating narrow conduits. Their skin could be thicker and more insulating, layered with microstructures that sense humidity and temperature rather than light. Reflective surfaces in the eye area might exist not for sight, but to catch faint bioluminescent flashes, or to gather the minimal photons that seep through fissures. Their musculature might favour slow, efficient movement, long strides measured in hours rather than minutes, an ability to brace against rock and shift weight with minimal energy expenditure. They would likely be small to medium in mass compared to surface megafauna, adapted to moving through constricted spaces and to distributing their metabolic needs across a dispersed community. Biochemistry, too, would be specialized. Where surface life relies heavily on photosynthetic primary production, a subsurface biosphere relies on chemoautotrophy, geothermal gradients, and the slow recycling of organic matter. Cryptoterrestrials might harness energy from reduced minerals, tapping into sulfur or iron cycles, deriving energy from radiolysis of water, or even cultivating specialized microbial consortia as a primary food source. In such an economy, agriculture as we know it would be replaced by microbial farming, engineered mats of chemolithoautotrophs, biofilms cultured on mineral matrices, and selective enzymatic processes to extract usable organic compounds. Over millennia, such practices could evolve into sophisticated bioengineering, communities that shape mineral flows, seed cave surfaces with nutrient-bearing films, and deploy living filters to recycle waste. The result would be a material culture that looks alien to us, not because it defies biology, but because it uses biology differently, as material, energy source, and tool. social structure among cryptoterrestrials would reflect both the constraints and the opportunities of the subterranean realm. In an environment where space is structured as networks of interconnected cavities, social groups might be organized around hubs, larger chambers that serve as communal centers for information exchange, smaller niches for family units, and long narrow conduits for transit and trade. Communication would be tuned to the medium, low-frequency acoustic signals that travel far through solid rock, patterned vibration transmitted along shared surfaces, and chemical signaling that conveys rich contextual data. Imagine a society whose songs are slow pulses that encode not only emotional states but maps, histories, and technical instruction. Their cultures could place high value on memory and oral tradition, because written records are vulnerable in the conditions of cave life. They would develop technologies to store information in mineral lattices or in long-lived microbial genomes, giving their knowledge a durable, non-volatile substrate. Technology that evolves underground would emphasize energy efficiency, modularity, and the exploitation of local resources. Instead of combustion and internal combustion engines, cryptoterrestrial technology may exploit piezoelectric effects in certain crystals, harness thermoelectric gradients, or rely on electrochemical cells fed by mineral oxidation. Construction techniques would favor mineral sequestration and in situ fabrication, biomineral composites that can be grown into structural shapes, channels lined with conductive ores, and membranes made of protein-based polymers that self-repair. If electromagnetic phenomena are part of their sensory world, they might have learned to shape fields for communication and to modulate local geology with resonant vibration. The occasional luminous events reported in caves could be natural bioluminescence amplified by engineered photonic structures, or controlled electrochemical discharges used for signaling or light. Their vehicles, if they have them, would be adapted to narrow, tortuous environments. Crawlers with segmented bodies able to fold and extend, or buoyant submersibles for navigating underground aquifers, vehicles that are efficient, quiet, and capable of squeezing through apertures that baffle human engineers. Why hide? The motivations of a cryptoterrestrial civilization for remaining unseen would combine pragmatic survival and cultural preference. Historically, underground life offers refuge from surface-level catastrophes, meteor impacts, ice ages, severe volcanic episodes, and human-induced disruption. Over geological time, the underground is a stable archive. A species that retreated below might have done so to avoid extended surface threats, or to pursue a way of life incompatible with open-air competition. Stealth could be a survival strategy. Small distributed populations are less visible and less likely to be disrupted by transient surface actors. There is also the ethical calculus of coexistence. An intelligence intimately aware of human violence and resource appetites might choose concealment as a policy. An intentional moral decision to let a more numerous and energetic species have the surface, while protecting vulnerable subterranean ecosystems. The choice to observe rather than contact might reflect a deep understanding that sudden revelation could lead to exploitation, conflict, or cultural collapse, outcomes undesirable for beings invested in long-term survival. Another motive for secrecy could be technological asymmetry. If cryptoterrestrials possess capabilities that would destabilize surface societies, for example, methods to manipulate tectonic stresses, localize control of groundwater, or material science that would revolutionize energy production, they may choose discretion to avoid creating a power imbalance. Strategic opacity preserves their autonomy and avoids becoming a target for resource extraction or weaponization. In addition, if their sensory and communicative modalities are so different from ours that attempts at contact produce misunderstanding or harm, Remaining hidden preserves both parties from accidental conflict. The prudence of invisibility can be a form of respect, an implicit agreement to observe and learn rather than to impose. Cultural reasons also matter. A civilization evolved in the dark may have ethical frameworks that prioritize minimal interference with the evolutionary processes, or spiritual systems that regard surface life with reverence or distance. Their mythologies, if they have them, could interpret the surface as a realm to be visited only under strict conditions, or as a pilgrimage site for rites of passage. Ceremonial openings of certain passages might be rare and tightly controlled, guarded by social taboos that ensure any contact occurs in ways consistent with their long-term values. Such cultural restraint would explain why eyewitnesses sometimes report brief, careful interactions rather than sustained contact or full disclosure. The behavioral patterns reported by surface witnesses often align with this portrait of cautious intelligence. Many encounter narratives describe beings that are watchful rather than aggressive, observers who maintain distance and retreat when approached. Some reports note deliberate rearrangement of belongings in neat, non-violent ways, items stacked or placed in a pattern that suggests study or communication rather than malice. Returnees who describe being guided through passages often emphasize a lack of fear or threat. Rather, they speak of an almost clinical curiosity, a methodical attention that studies and then releases. If cryptoterrestrials operate under ethical constraints, many surface encounters, puzzling, disorienting, but lacking overt hostility, begin to make a kind of sense. This hypothesis also helps interpret certain technological anomalies. If cryptoterrestrials communicate in low-frequency acoustics and modulate local electromagnetic fields, surface instruments not tuned to those modalities will record interference and odd signatures. Ground-penetrating radar and magnetometers might pick up patterns that look like noise but are purposeful coding. Seismic stations could be sensitive to patterned vibrations that are a language in stone. In some recorded cases, investigators have found recurring rhythmic pulses in seismic or acoustic data that do not match natural seismic phases. In others, thermal anomalies move with a purpose that mimics migration, or a pattern of activity consistent with deliberate movement through a landscape. Within the cryptoterrestrial framework, such signals are not mere curiosity. They are the byproduct of communication, transport, and the slow, deliberate work of a hidden civilization. We can also think about strategic advantages that an underground civilization might enjoy. Isolation permits cultural continuity in ways surface societies cannot easily maintain. Underground archives can be remarkably stable. Cold, shielded chambers preserve organic matter and microstructures for long periods. If cryptoterrestrials cultivate microbes as informational media, their records might be embedded in genomes or mineral layers that are legible only to those initiated into particular decoding techniques. Their technologies, biofabrication, mineral engineering, and resonant manipulation of structures, could accumulate incrementally over millennia, producing innovations unlike anything surface engineers would conceive within comparable timeframes. Another avenue of advantage lies in mobility and concealment. Subterranean networks can be extensive and convoluted, providing paths that evade surface detection and that connect regions far apart. If cryptoterrestrials use water-saturated conduits or narrow fissures as highways, they can move people and resources with a discretion that would baffle surface logistics. This mobility yields strategic flexibility, the ability to withdraw to refugia in the face of disturbance, to trade quietly with small surface groups, or to monitor without being monitored. The developmental timeline for such a civilization could be ancient. If a lineage retreated underground during a period of climatic stress tens of thousands of years ago, it would have had ample time to diverge in body, language, and technology. In the fossil record, we do not necessarily expect to see their traces readily. Subterranean environments rarely fossilize large vertebrates in accessible contexts, and material culture built of biominerals would often be difficult to distinguish from natural formations without detailed analysis. Moreover, the cultural preference for secrecy we hypothesize would further reduce the archaeological record. What remains then are hints, petroglyphs, odd artifacts in sealed chambers, and a pattern of oral traditions that preserve memory in coded forms. If cryptoterrestrials do exist and maintain limited contact, what forms might those interactions take? They could range from observational monitoring, mapping human activity, cataloguing technological progress, and studying our languages, to cautious, controlled exchanges. The small-scale anomalies reported by miners and spelunkers might represent trial contacts, leaving a measured sign, arranging objects in a pattern, or guiding a lost person back to the surface in a manner that avoids revealing too much. More directed exchanges could involve subtle signaling, altering low-frequency acoustic patterns near a settlement to convey warning, or manipulating local mineral deposits to leave a durable message. In the diplomatic imagination, cryptoterrestrials might prefer slow, incremental disclosure, test for safety, assess cultural readiness, and reveal only the least disruptive aspects of their presence. How would we know when such a phase shifts toward explicit contact? There would be telltale signs, sustained, repeatable patterns in sensor arrays across multiple, independent observatories, clear artifacts whose manufacture is unambiguously non-natural, or coordinated global phenomena that bear markers of intention and complexity beyond natural processes. We might witness controlled openings, carefully staged events where specific groups are invited into a subterranean chamber under terms designed to preserve secrecy and safety. Alternatively, an event like a major seismic anomaly could inadvertently expose deeper chambers, forcing an accidental encounter. Both scenarios would produce different social and political reactions, but in each case the immediate questions would be the same. What is the intention of the cryptoterrestrials? How should humans respond ethically? And what protocols protect vulnerable ecosystems and cultures? It is worth considering ethical frameworks for engagement before such an event occurs. Respect for autonomy, non-exploitation of unique ecologies, and caution around introducing surface pathogens to a closed biosphere are essential. Cryptoterrestrial communities, if they exist, would be vulnerable to disease in ways we cannot fully predict. Our microbes, chemicals, and even electromagnetic technologies could harm them unintentionally. Conversely, their biological systems could introduce novel microbial agents into surface ecosystems with unknown effects. A prudent approach emphasizes containment, careful study, and cooperative dialogue led by interdisciplinary teams. Biologists, ethicists, anthropologists, spelunking specialists, and diplomats trained in long-term, low-impact engagement. The idea of treaties with hidden neighbours may sound like fiction, but diplomatic imagination matters. History shows that encounters between unequal societies often lead to exploitation and suffering. If humans were to discover a subterranean intelligence, ethical leadership would require humility, a precautionary principle, and the construction of protocols that safeguard both parties. Ideally, such protocols would be built upon shared values: the sanctity of life, the protection of ecosystems, and the minimization of harm. This is not just a practical stance, it is a moral one, shaped by the lessons of colonial history and the recognition that contact can be as destructive as it is illuminating. Finally, If cryptoterrestrials choose to observe rather than intervene, what lessons might they be learning? Perhaps they watch for thresholds in our technological development that signal risks, rapid weaponization of energy sources, planetary-scale environmental degradation, or behavioral patterns that predict conflict. Perhaps they monitor for signs of global cooperation that would make transparent contact less dangerous. Their pacing in such a case would be risk management writ across millennia, a slow, steady watch that balances curiosity with caution. As we draw this chapter toward a close, hold the image of a subterranean city not as a caricature of fantasy, but as a plausible, ecologically coherent adaptation. Think of long halls lit by bioluminescent gardens, of archives encoded in mineral bands, of societies organized around resonant songs, and of technologies that harness rock, microbe and mineral in quiet, efficient ways. Think of beings who value patience and secrecy, who watch the surface with measured interest, and who protect themselves through a policy of concealment. Above all, consider that the hypothesis of cryptoterrestrials shifts the human question from "are we alone in the universe?" to "how do we responsibly and ethically share this planet with other forms of intelligence that evolved here in the quiet and deep?" Chapter 8: UFOs and UAPs as subsurface vehicles, not extraterrestrial but inner Earth. Over decades of observation, one of the most persistent puzzles of modern aerial phenomena is not the sighting itself, but the way objects behave around the ground. They hover above lakes and then vanish as if sinking beneath the surface. They approach mountain faces and disappear into a slope. They appear to merge with volcanic vents, or to dip straight down into fields and never re-emerge. If we broaden our perspective to consider the subsurface as an accessible domain rather than an impermeable barrier, these behaviors begin to form a coherent and strangely elegant pattern. Rather than imagining all anomalous aerial objects as visitors from a distant star, consider a different possibility. Some UAPs are vehicles or manifestations of movement that originate below the crust and use hidden apertures, caverns, and fluid conduits as their transit and staging areas. This view does not deny the possibility of extraterrestrial origins for some reports. It simply offers an additional, credible model, one grounded on the known porosity and connectivity of the Earth's near-surface systems. Think first of the observed maneuvers that most commonly baffle trained observers: high-speed, near-instantaneous changes in velocity and direction, the ability to vanish vertically, movement with negligible thermal signature despite energetic accelerations, and emergent behavior near bodies of water or volcanic activity. Each of these can be interpreted through the lens of subsurface operation, a craft that is optimized for confined corridors beneath a mountain would not need, for example, to use winged flight like a surface plane. It could rely on a combination of buoyant movement in subterranean aquifers, resonant vibration that interacts with a rock to produce locomotion, or electromagnetic coupling that changes local density and creates a path of least resistance through solid strata. For an observer above, such abilities manifest as abrupt changes and vanishing acts, precisely the features that make many reports so puzzling. There are also repeated clusters of sightings in places with known subterranean complexity: volcanic fields, karst regions, deep freshwater lakes, and tectonic rift zones. Pilots and ground witnesses in these areas often report objects descending into the ground's features with apparent ease. A pilot flying low over a volcanic caldera may watch a disk approach a fumarole and in a blink disappear into the fumarole's throat and never re-emerge. For a community of subterranean dwellers, a geothermal vent provides both energy and a physical portal. For a surface observer, it looks like a craft dissolving into smoke. Similarly, lakes with deep sinkholes or submerged cave systems offer immediate access to wide, water-filled hollows that connect to inland conduits. An object that seems to submerge under a lake can, in this model, simply be entering a sunlit shaft that quickly narrows and curves out of sight. Let us imagine a calm, detailed eyewitness vignette that contains the kind of patterns that have been reported multiple times in slightly different languages. A commercial cargo pilot on a routine night flight over a mountain range notes a steady orange glow below his left wing. Expecting to see a camp or a controlled flare, he diverts and radios air traffic control. The glow is vertical, like a column of light rising from a small valley. The pilot circles for a few minutes watching. Then the glowing column lengthens and compresses, and a rounded object descends, aligning itself with the column. The pilot sees a smooth silhouette drop into the light and disappear. Minutes later, his instruments register a brief and localized disruption. In his radar returns, and a faint low-frequency vibration that he later describes as the plane's bones settling. The tower registers nothing. The crew files a report noting the exact coordinates, the altitude, and a series of instrumentation irregularities. The coordinates correspond to a valley mapped by geologists as having deep, submerged pits and a dense network of lava tubes. Months later, a remote sensing team in that valley detect thermal irregularities and a pattern of low-frequency seismic pulses that recur in intervals. Taken together, the pilot's report and the geophysical signatures suggest an above-ground sighting that transitions into a below-ground sequence. Naval observers contribute a complementary set of patterns. Submarine sonar operators, trained to pick out the hum of marine life and the mechanical signature of other vessels, have recorded fast, compact echoes that accelerate away from their sensors at rates inconsistent with known biological or mechanical propulsion. In a handful of cases, sonar returns trace a high-speed object moving horizontally at depth, and then show the echo disappearing as if it sank into the seabed, or passed through a fractured column of rock into a deeper void. Hydroacoustic arrays, designed to monitor submarine activity and tectonic events, sometimes pick up broadband signatures that broaden and then abruptly truncate. An acoustic signature consistent with transition from an open water propagation regime into a heavily attenuating medium such as congested rock conduits. For the attentive mind, these recordings suggest vehicles capable of traversing both fluid and porous solid environments, a hybrid locomotion that humans have yet to master at scale. Military and civilian aviation records include instances where fast, unexplained objects make near-vertical dives and appear to vanish into the ground in a single second. Trained pilots describe the event with clinical precision. Coordinates, timestamps, vehicle heading, and the exact nature of the maneuver. Radar returns, when present, sometimes show the object descending to ground level, and then the return signal collapsing into noise. In other cases, radar shows an object's signature peeling into layers, as if the object's radar cross-section is reconfiguring into a spectrum the radar cannot resolve, then abruptly ceasing. One plausible subsurface model is that these vehicles exploit narrow-frequency windows or interference strategies to become effectively invisible to surface radar as they pass through specific rock geometries. Another is that they transit into media that strongly attenuates radar. Water-filled shafts, dense mineralized rock, or engineered apertures lined with materials that absorb or scatter radar frequencies. These models are technically sophisticated but remain within the bounds of plausible physics if one allows for technologies that manipulate local electromagnetic properties. There are also reports that link UAP activity with seismic and geothermal events in time and space. Observers have noted UAPs near the perimeters of volcanic eruptions or geothermal anomalies, before those events became publicly understood. If a subterranean civilization monitors geothermal flux as an energy source or a danger signal, their craft might be deployed to investigate or regulate such change. A craft that can access a magma interface could be using the energy gradient to power transport, or it might be monitoring tectonic stress in ways that are invisible to our instruments. To a surface seismometer, such activity might register as a non-tectonic pulse, a localized disturbance with spectral content distinct from ordinary earthquakes. The acoustic world further enriches the model. Many pilots and cave teams report a hum, a low resonant tone that seems to precede or accompany sightings. Low-frequency sound travels efficiently through rock and water, and it can serve as a long-range communication channel. For a biological or technological system optimized for subsurface life, low-frequency signaling enables coordination across kilometers of rock. If surface monitors record such tones in conjunction with sightings, and if those tones map to resonant modes of local geology, then the tones may be signatures of a subterranean transit or communication system rather than mere background noise. Another aspect worth contemplating is the interface, the small openings that link the deep with the surface. Natural apertures exist, sinkholes, caves, fumaroles, and submerged entrances, but a civilization that operates below the surface may also create or maintain concealed portals. These openings might be camouflaged by vegetation, located in inaccessible cliffs, or submerged beyond the reach of casual swimmers. A vehicle rising from such an aperture would appear to leap from nowhere, while in reality it emerges from a deliberately protected corridor. Consider also engineered vents designed to maintain local airflow and pressure balancing. A well-designed portal could rapidly equalize pressure to allow an object to pass without producing obvious surface turbulence, making the surface appearance even more uncanny. There are social and procedural elements to consider as well. When pilots or sailors submit reports, the path from observation to public awareness is often interrupted by classification, skepticism, or institutional caution. Patterns that might have been studied across multiple agencies are sometimes partitioned, leaving researchers with incomplete datasets. If some phenomena are related to subterranean operations, whether biological, technological, or a mix, the siloed nature of reporting can obscure the cross-domain correlations, a pilot sighting matched with a naval sonar signature, and a later geothermal anomaly, for example. Encouraging open, multidisciplinary data sharing would help reveal whether the subsurface UAP model has predictive power and whether it can guide safe, measured exploration. Finally, there is the human element of interpretation. When confronted with a phenomenon that defies ordinary categories, people naturally seek narratives that feel complete. The Inner Earth model is compelling because it offers an architecture to the anomaly, a network of hidden corridors and staging areas that explains the vanishing acts, a set of energy strategies that explain low thermal signatures, and a set of sensory and signaling modes, low-frequency acoustics, electromagnetic modulation, that explain instrument interference. This model does not close the book. It invites systematic investigation. It poses testable questions. Do UAP sightings cluster above mapped subterranean networks more often than chance? Do seismic and hydroacoustic arrays detect non-tectonic pulses coincident with reported vanishings? Can long-term integrated monitoring in hotspot regions reveal coordinated patterns that align with pilot, maritime, and sensor reports? As we breathe and move forward in this calm exploration, carry this image lightly. Luminous craft rising like bubbles from a hidden waterway, a subtle hum rolling through stone as a vehicle glides into a fumarole, a pilot circling above and filing a precise report that will later meet seismologists' notes and fishermen's stories. The Inner Earth model honors both the mystery of the sightings and the rigor of a scientific approach. It asks us to knit together surface and subsurface data, to treat each sighting as potentially part of a broader pattern, and to pursue truth with patience. In the next chapter, we will examine a pivotal event, the 2025 Deep Earth Anomaly, a detailed, realistic incident that, in this narrative, draws many of these threads together and forces a global re-evaluation of everything we thought we knew about what moves beneath our feet. Chapter 8. Complete. Chapter 9. The 2025 Deep Earth Anomaly, an event that changed everything. In early 2025, something happened that shifted the conversation from whispered curiosity to urgent global attention. It began as a faint patterned signal recorded across a network of observatories. Not a single dramatic flash, but a slow, coherent series of low-frequency pulses that threaded together seismometers, infrasound stations and deep borehole arrays on 3 continents. At first, the pulses were easy to dismiss. An experimental seismic survey, a cluster of synchronized industrial operations, or even an unusual storm coupling into the ground. As days passed and the pattern persisted, cross-checking teams began to notice a geometry to the data. A travelling wave of energy that hummed along a belt of tectonic plates, at speeds inconsistent with ordinary tectonic creep, a warm corridor detected by satellite thermal sensors that advance beneath the crust at a rate of kilometers per day, and localized electromagnetic anomalies that blinked in intermittent encoded bursts. The word anomaly was used in lab notes, internal memos, and late-night phone calls. Within a week, 3 separate scientific institutions had flagged the series as anomalous enough to convene emergency interdisciplinary reviews. The key features that collectively made the event unlike ordinary geophysical noise were subtle, technical, and oddly coordinated. First, the low-frequency pulses exhibited a clear periodicity, narrow band energy concentrated around 0.7 to 1.3 Hz, with harmonics appearing at precise integer multiples across the spectrum. These were not broadband tectonic tremors, they were patterned. Second, the thermal maps from several independent satellite platforms showed a migrating warmth beneath a contiguous stretch of crust, a subsurface pulse that translated along a near-linear path. The surface expressed this migration as small, temporary thermal gradients. Isolated patches where ground temperature rose by 2 to 6 degrees Celsius relative to background, then cooled as the pulse moved on. Third, borehole temperature logs recorded abrupt, localized spikes at specific depths, accompanied by short bursts of high-order electromagnetic noise across very low-frequency bands. Fourth, acoustic arrays recorded near-infrasonic beats that produced coherent phase shift in seismic stations located hundreds of kilometers apart. Taken together, these signatures suggested coordinated activity below the crustal layer rather than a one-off geologic event. Newsrooms and government hotlines filled with calls as scientists, civil engineers, miners and aviation crews shared what they had observed. In a remote mining region where one corridor of the thermal pulse crossed, 3 miners were in the process of returning from a deep shaft when their headlamps dimmed simultaneously and a low hum filled the air. They described the hum as a living sound, not deafening, but internally felt, almost like a vibration in the bones. One miner later said that the air tasted metallic, like rain on hot iron. They reported seeing a chamber ahead suffused with a cool, phosphorescent glow. In their accounts, figures stood at the edge of the glow, tall, silent, with elongated limbs folded in ways that reduced their silhouette. The miners said the figures made no aggressive move. Instead, they stepped aside, and a corridor opened like a mouth to the deeper passage. The miners left, but one of them, an operator who later became a central witness in later inquiries, carried with him a physical residue, a fine, glassy film on his gloves that resisted standard mineral testing. Laboratories noted the residue's composition as unusual. It contained a blend of silica microtectites and organic microfibers whose isotopic ratios did not match known, local geology or contaminants from mining processes. That single sample, contested and heavily analysed, became a focal point for both scientific curiosity and bureaucratic caution. Around the same time, civilian pilots along a transcontinental route reported coordinated sightings. Luminous objects descending near specific mountain ranges, then vanishing in tight fissures. Flight data recorders logged transient radio noise and momentary loss of GPS lock in the same air blocks. Radar stations reported ephemeral returns that collapsed into noise as objects approached the surface and then failed to reappear. Naval crews in a nearby inland sea registered brief hydroacoustic signatures, focused narrowband energy bursts that accelerated and then cut off abruptly close to the seafloor. Independent sonar analysts who reviewed the recordings observed that the acoustic envelope suggested a transfer from a fluid propagation regime to an attenuating rock environment, an acoustic signature consistent with an object-changing medium from open water into a porous subterranean conduit. The event forced a rare cross-disciplinary response. Geophysicists, seismologists, microbiologists, acoustic engineers, planetary scientists, and remote sensing specialists were convened together in secure video conference rooms. The initial, cautious scientific posture was to exhaust natural explanations, migrating hydrothermal fluids, new patterns of magma movement, unusual seasonal groundwater flow, or a coordinated industrial operation spanning national boundaries. Many of these hypotheses could explain parts of the dataset, but not the full set of correlated phenomena. Hydrothermal flow, for instance, explains heat and certain EM transients, but it is unlikely to produce the precise harmonic periodicity seen in the 0.7 to 1.3 Hz band across disconnected basins. A coordinated industrial source could emit narrowband energy, but the geographic distribution, spanning protected reserves and deep continental interiors with no known industrial footprint, raised logistical issues. As the failings of naturalistic and industrial models accumulated, working groups began to acknowledge what they had long treated as an uncomfortable possibility: a mobile, deliberate phenomenon operating at the crustal interface. Leaked memos and off-the-record disclosures began to circulate in the technical community, and eventually in public forums. Anonymous sources from within a defense installation reported that satellite topography had shown a beneath-the-surface pulse, moving in a discrete, near-linear manner. According to some of these leaks, a joint high-altitude imaging dataset revealed a thermal ribbon traced for hundreds of kilometers. Not a surface hotspot, but a subsurface corridor that produced faint, pulsed surface warming. Other leaks spoke of instruments capturing brief, coded electromagnetic bursts within the very low-frequency VLF band at the same localized depths where the borehole logs had spiked. These disclosures, while fragmentary and often redacted by the media that first published them, was striking in how they echoed the pattern of the original scientific anomalies. Public reaction was a mix of fear, awe, and methodical curiosity. Governments issued cautious alerts about drilling and mining in affected corridors. Scientists urged calm and argued for expanded, coordinated monitoring. A few weeks into the event, a multinational research coalition placed passive sensor arrays across several suspected nodes: deep-well thermistors, muon tomography rigs, broadband seismic arrays, and magnetotelluric receivers to build three-dimensional, multimodal maps of the region. The early outputs were tantalizing. Muon tomography suggested voids with geometric coherence in several mapped locations, and long baseline seismic cross-correlation revealed intermittent, directionally consistent impulsive events aligned to the pulse's trajectory. Thermal imaging continued to show migrating warmth in patterns that avoided purely tectonic explanation. In one cluster, an isolated void was imaged that exhibited rectilinear corridors on multiple modalities, a repeated structural motif hard to reconcile with random karst formation. Simultaneously, first-hand testimonies multiplied. A small town near one mapped node reported an unusual sequence of animal behavior. Birds leaving roosts en masse in the early hours, dogs howling in a pattern, residents described as not like anything they had heard before, and livestock showing food avoidance behavior. Several residents reported a deep music, a slow pulse, felt rather than heard, that preceded small localized ground tremors. At a neighboring facility that monitored groundwater chemistry, technicians observed transient changes in redox potential and dissolved organic carbon that corresponded with the passing of the thermal pulse. In short, biological and chemical systems were, in places, responding to the phenomenon in measurable ways. Human institutions reacted predictably and sometimes clumsily. Regulatory agencies raised moratoria on new deep drilling and certain mining activities in mapped corridors. Military installations increased overflight and radar coverage. Some private companies, wary of liability and unknown ecological consequences, halted operations temporarily. The scientific coalition sought transparency and collaboration. Defense and national security bodies insisted on control over certain data sets. This tension produced a frustrating gap in public knowledge, feeding speculation and sometimes panic. Yet it also created an unlikely impetus for collaboration among scientists, NGOs, and concerned citizen groups that pushed for open data and peer review. Among the most consequential moments of the 2025 anomaly were a handful of rescues and encounters that defied simple explanation. In a sealed mine connected to one of the corridors, a small collapse trapped 4 workers. The rescue operation proceeded under normal protocols until equipment began to register unusual interference at the entrance. Magnetometers fluctuated without correlated geological noise. Long-wave radios experienced phase slips, and thermal cameras caught a cool internal glow moving behind a wall of stone. When rescuers breached the chamber, the workers were found alive and calm, sitting in a small alcove that, by all surface measurement, did not exist on the mine's maps. The workers described being led through a narrow, winding passage by tall, slow-moving silhouettes that did not seem hostile. One of the rescued men recounted hearing a structured sequence of tones that, when played back and analysed, contained a repeating harmonic series with a bass frequency matching the global 0.7 to 1.3 Hz pulse. The forensic team that processed the site found minute particulate deposits along the path, a fine filamentous film, and small tessellated impressions in soft mineral surfaces that did not match known tool patterns. These were not wild stories spun in the dark. They were documented observations paired with physical traces that science could assay. The event catalyzed a shift in the tenor of public conversations. Scientific curiosity, ethical reflection, and geopolitical caution combined. If the pulses, the thermal corridor, the acoustic harmonics, and the muon-imaged voids pointed towards structured subsurface activity, then humanity faced practical and moral questions it had rarely considered. How to study without damaging delicate subterranean ecologies, how to avoid contaminating a closed biosphere, how to ensure responsible, multidisciplinary engagement rather than militarized domination. These deliberations created working groups within the scientific coalition dedicated not only to measurement, but to policy, guidelines for low-impact exploration, quarantine procedures, and international protocols for shared data. Finally, the 2025 event altered professional cultures. Previously skeptical researchers began to acknowledge that the planet might host organized phenomena at depth that demanded careful study. Funding streams appeared for long-term and non-invasive mapping, a new class of instruments, low-energy muon imagers, long-duration borehole acoustic arrays, and passive multispectral ground sensors were developed rapidly to avoid the pitfalls of invasive drilling. The narrative changed from a tidy binary, natural or hoax, to a layered research program acknowledging complexity, uncertainty, and the possibility that intelligence could have adapted to the subterranean niche. For those who experienced the pulses directly, life after the anomaly held a different texture. The miners who found the phosphorescent chamber sometimes woke in the night to the memory of slow, patient silhouettes. Pilots who reported vanishings felt a new respect for the landscape beneath their paths. Scientists who had shelved anomalous data in private notebooks were suddenly offered resources to pursue those datasets publicly. The global conversation moved from fringe speculation into a cautious professional engagement, tempered by ethics, informed by data, and driven by the profound realization that the deep Earth might not be as empty as we'd assumed. Chapter 10. What cryptoterrestrials might want. Theories, motives, and clues. Breathe slowly as we settle deeper into this question. If an intelligence lives beneath our feet, what could it want? Motive is a human word, and it carries human assumptions about hunger, dominance, curiosity, and survival. But when we use it here, let us expand the meaning gently to include ecological needs, cultural priorities, and long-term risk management. A subterranean civilization shaped by different sensory worlds, different energy economies, and different temporal horizons would have aims that may be both familiar and alien to us. In this chapter, we will consider the full range of plausible motives: survival and seclusion, resource stewardship, knowledge preservation, monitoring and management, and cautious contact. And we will listen for the subtle clues that point toward each possibility. We will do this calmly and patiently, allowing the evidence, the stories, and the ecological logic to guide us. At the simplest level, survival is motive enough. The deep Earth offers safety. It buffers climate swings, dampens radiation spikes, and protects against surface-level catastrophes. For any species that discovered fragility on the surface, long ago volcanic winters, meteor impacts, abrupt climatic swings, retreating beneath would be an adaptive choice. Imagine a lineage that found refuge in the stable thermal regime of deep caverns, where temperatures remain constant, storms cannot reach, and predators are fewer. Over millennia, such a species would refine ways to harvest energy from the local environment, cultivating chemolitho, autotrophic microbial gardens, tapping mineral redox gradients, or exploiting low-grade geothermal heat via bioelectrochemical systems. Those fundamental survival motives could explain why a cryptoterrestrial society might avoid contact. Contact risks exposure, disease, and resource competition. Preservation of a niche is a powerful conservative motive. Closely related is resource stewardship. The subterranean world is rich in specific materials, mineral veins, geothermal gradients, brackish aquifers, and isolated reservoirs of organic matter. A subterranean civilization would likely develop practices to manage these resources sustainably. because depletion in a closed environment has immediate, harsh consequences. If their energy comes from slow gradients in rock chemistry or from cultivated microbial mats, their economic logic would favour careful use and long recycling cycles. In such a context, secrecy as a tool, keeping certain deposits hidden and the corridors that access them undisclosed would be a rational defence against surface exploitation. The repeated reports of small-scale, precise mineral harvesting, polished niches, tiny cut marks on veins, and orderly removal of select deposits fit a model of targeted low-impact extraction rather than large-scale strip mining. Those traces suggest a civilization that harvests with restraint and discretion. Knowledge preservation is another compelling motive. Many cultures on the surface store their most precious artifacts in underground vaults. The steady temperature and stable chemistry make caves ideal safekeeping. For a civilization living permanently below, archives could be literal. Mineral layers seeded with encoded microbial genomes, crystalline lattices grown to store phonetic or resonant signatures, or chemical strata that encode maps and histories. Imagine a library that writes itself into carbonate bands, where knowledge is not easily read by the uninitiated. This motive would explain deliberate actions that appear ritualistic to surface observers. Carefully placed artifacts in sealed chambers, arranged stones in repeating patterns, and alcoves lined with objects seemingly too delicate for casual use. Such placements could be messages to their own future, a cultural insistence on continuity, or protocols for preserving knowledge through epochs of geological change. Monitoring and management of the surface is a different class of motive, active rather than purely defensive. If a subterranean society evolved with an awareness of the surface, it might invest in surveillance, not for conquest but for risk assessment, monitoring tectonic stress, mapping human technological expansion, and tracking environmental degradation that could threaten both worlds. The 2025 Deep Earth Anomaly illustrates this motive in narrative form. Patterned pulses, moving thermal corridors, and low-frequency signals could plausibly be scans or probes used to map the mechanical state of the crust and to detect the emergence of hazards. A subterranean intelligence attentive to stress accumulation could intervene indirectly by redistributing fluids, venting heat, or engaging structural dampening to prevent catastrophic release. These actions, if they occur, would be both protective and secretive, minimizing notice to avoid panic or interference. Another plausible motive is interspecies equilibrium, a desire to maintain balance between their world and ours. From their vantage, human activity that changes hydrology, chemistry, or electromagnetic backgrounds can have outsized effects on fragile subterranean ecologies. Damming rivers, injecting fluids via industrial operations, or drilling deep boreholes can alter groundwater flow and introduce surface microbes to closed ecosystems. A cryptoterrestrial community might monitor such intrusive activities and take measured action to mitigate harm, sealing a breached aperture, rerouting shallow flows, or signaling through subtle disturbances to draw attention away from hazardous sites. The signs surface observers sometimes report: lights arranged in geometrical patterns near construction sites, inexplicable ground hums preceding sudden equipment failures, or the neat repositioning of items on a workbench, could be interpreted as forms of feedback intended to prevent faster, more damaging interaction. Cultural and spiritual motives should not be dismissed as mere anthropomorphism. Many human cultures revere particular landscapes and enact taboos to protect them. An underground civilization could hold analogous spiritual commitments, sacred chambers where certain actions are forbidden, ritual pathways that ensure minimal damage to communal spaces, or cosmologies that interpret surface life as a separate domain to be engaged with only under ceremonial conditions. Such a worldview would explain behaviors we interpret as evasive or cryptic. To them, retreat is an ethic rather than a strategy. The recurring motif across eyewitness accounts of beings who watch but do not harm, who arrange rather than seize, resonates with a culture that values stewardship and measured contact. We also must consider technological motives, use of the subsurface for transit, staging, and experimentation. Hidden corridors and caverns offer extraordinary opportunities for development away from the surveillance of surface civilizations. Laboratories, test sites for technologies that manipulate local physics, and nodes for energy exchange could all be located underground to reduce risk and to maintain privacy. If cryptoterrestrials have developed methods to modulate electromagnetic fields or to produce low-frequency mechanical resonance, these capabilities would be best tested and refined away from densely populated areas. This motive would account for coordinated activity in remote regions, precise thermal anomalies, and the episodic emergence of craft above apertures. The subterranean environment is both workshop and refuge. Now let us listen for the clues that align with these motives, drawn from eyewitness fragments, physical residues, and recurring patterns. Here first, the phenomenon of simultaneous lights in connected cave systems. Multiple observers across wide regions have told variants of the same story. In the dead of night, lights of cool bluish-green hue appear in separate cave mouths miles apart, pulse in a slow pattern, and then extinguish nearly simultaneously. When these events are analysed, they sometimes correspond to small, coordinated thermal shifts detected by sensitive ground sensors, and local wildlife displays a predictable behavioural pattern. Nocturnal animals briefly quiet, then resume as if nothing happened. This synchronization suggests a networked system, not random flickers but phased signaling across an interconnected infrastructure. Such behavior fits a civilization that practices distributed monitoring or synchronous ritual, using light and heat as non-disruptive communication. Another subtle clue is the ordered arrangement of found objects. Across disparate accounts, a handful of search teams describe clothing items folded with uncommon care, or tools stacked in repeating geometric arrays. These are not acts of malevolence. They look more like catalogues or markers. If a subterranean society wishes to study a human without harm, arranging the person's belongings in patterns could be a way to communicate non-verbally, to leave a readable pattern for their own kind, or to mark a location as assessed. The practice resembles archival cataloguing, a controlled sampling and a record left in situ, until it is recovered for closer inspection. Chemical and material residues are another category of clues. The miners who encountered the phosphorescent corridor in 2025 brought back a fine, glassy film that resisted quick classification. In other accounts, spelunkers have found faint filamentous films along cave walls that, under magnification, show ordered microstructures, repeating lattices not known in common mineral growth. These microstructures sometimes contain organics with slightly anomalous isotope ratios, suggesting either unique biochemistry or deliberate processing. Laboratories that respectfully analyze such samples, avoiding contamination and following strict chain of custody, sometimes return results that lean toward novelty rather than simple contamination. While each sample is ambiguous on its own, a pattern of similar residues across independent sites gently points toward persistent, intentional manufacture or cultivation. Acoustic patterns provide another thread. Low-frequency pulses recorded near several independent cave systems show harmonic structure, repetition, and modulation. In some cases, these pulses encode phase shifts that recur in predictable sequences, like phrases in a slow language. When compared across sites, researchers find that the pulse sequences sometimes align with known geological resonant modes of local rock formations, suggesting that the signals are tuned to the medium itself. This tuning is an elegant and efficient method for long-range subterranean communication. Instead of broadcasting through attenuating media, convey information through the mineral lattice that best carries the signal. The presence of structured acoustic sequences, especially when synchronized across distances, reads like a communication architecture evolved for stone. There are also behavioral clues among returned individuals. People who re-emerge after unexplained absences sometimes speak of being guided, not abducted, of hands that steadied them, of slow corridors that opened, and of a pervasive lack of fear. Many emphasize the sensory oddities: a cool luminescence, a taste like metallic rain, a music that vibrated through their bones. These testimonies, treated with medical and psychological care, often include unusual but consistent details: transient skin markings that fade in days, temporary changes in circadian rhythm, and a heightened sensitivity to low-frequency sound. In credible instances where forensic tests follow, traces of unusual micro-residues have been found on clothing and skin. These combined sensory and physical clues suggest that the encounters are not purely hallucinatory, but involve real, localized environments with consistent properties. Another recurring motif is the wildlife silence before an event. Multiple witnesses across different regions report that animals, birds, frogs, and nocturnal mammals go inexplicably quiet in the minutes leading up to an anomalous occurrence. Quiet is data. Many animals detect low-frequency cues we do not. Their sudden stillness could indicate a change in acoustic or electromagnetic background. This behavioral shift may be both an early warning signal and an effect of the cryptoterrestrial activity itself. If a low-frequency hum precedes movement or a thermal pulse, animals may respond first, and then humans notice the sequence. These ecological cues are subtle but repeatable enough in some clusters to merit targeted study with coordinated instrumentation. Finally, consider the social logic of slow contact. Many eyewitness accounts describe brief, carefully controlled interactions rather than prolonged exposure. Objects left in patterns, people guided gently toward exits, and transient lighting all imply a cautious, staged approach to contact. Such restraint aligns with an intelligence that understands the asymmetric risks of sudden global disclosure. It suggests a civilization that values the integrity of both its society and ours, preferring incremental tests over dramatic reveals. In that sense, the slow accumulation of small, verifiable clues, thermal shifts, acoustic sequences, patterned arrangements, and resilient residues may be the preferred method of communication. Low-disruption signals that beckon the curious without triggering large-scale alarm. As we close this chapter, let us hold a soft, steady image. Subterranean corridors lit by muted bioluminescence, small signs arranged as a careful code, a low, patient hum that translates into mapped information across kilometers of stone. Consider that what cryptoterrestrials might want is not conquest or domination, but the same practical, long-term aims many human communities have: survival, stewardship, knowledge, and measured interaction. The clues we collect, physical, acoustic, biological, and testimonial, form a growing constellation of evidence that, if followed with rigor and compassion, could guide us toward responsible encounter. In the next chapter, we will ask the urgent question of our time: are we close to discovery? We will weigh the emerging data of recent years, the technological advances in mapping and detection, and the human factors that shape whether contact will remain rare or become inevitable. We will move forward with patience, careful methodology, and a steady ethical compass. Chapter 11. Are we close to discovery? The emerging evidence of 2025 and beyond. In the calm of long nights and the slow work of scientific labs, discovery rarely arrives as a single flash. It accumulates, layer by patient layer, as instruments sharpen, datasets grow, and formerly dismissed anomalies begin to gather into coherent patterns. Over the last few years, the groundwork for a credible, testable approach to the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis has improved in three broad ways. Our sensing technologies have reached depths and resolutions once thought impossible. Public and institutional willingness to treat anomalous phenomena as legitimate subjects of study has increased, and cross-disciplinary networks have grown more effective at correlating data from air, sea, and subsurface sensors. These shifts do not prove the existence of hidden intelligences, but they make the question empirically tractable in ways that a generation ago would have been science fiction. One of the most important technological advances is the practical maturation of muon tomography and related passive imaging methods for mapping deep voids non-invasively. Scientists are now routinely using naturally occurring cosmic ray muons to build three-dimensional density maps of rock, enough to detect cavities and large-scale structures at previously unreachable depths. Academic and industry work this decade has pushed muography from a laboratory curiosity into field-ready systems that image mines, archaeological features, and natural caverns with steadily improving resolution. These tools change the game because they allow researchers to detect spatial geometries that invite a closer look without the ecological disruption of drilling everywhere. When multiple independent teams apply muon imaging and find coherent void geometries that match patterns detected in other modalities, the probability that something unusual is present rises and justifies further, careful investigation. Complementing muon techniques, long baseline seismic arrays, broadband acoustic monitoring, and infrasound networks are becoming more sensitive and better integrated. Volcano monitoring programs and new frameworks for near real-time detection of very long-period signals have shown us how subtle, coherent motions in rock and fluid can be tracked across wide areas. These systems are designed to spot slow, low-frequency phenomena, exactly the kinds of signatures that many hypothesized subsurface activities would produce, whether geological, biological, or engineered. When acoustic and seismic arrays register rhythmic narrowband energy that aligns in time and space with thermal or electromagnetic anomalies, researchers can begin to assemble the kind of multimodal map needed to separate natural geophysics from purposeful patterns. This is why improved infrasound and long-period seismic monitoring is such a crucial piece of the puzzle. A third class of advances is the avalanche of remote sensing and data fusion capabilities. Satellite thermal mapping, hyperspectral imaging, gravimetric microsurveys, and improved magnetotelluric methods allow teams to flag anomalous corridors of heat, slight gravity deficits consistent with voids, and magnetic irregularities that might correspond to engineered or unusual mineral assemblages. When these remote flags align with ground-based muon and seismic observations, the case for targeted, minimally invasive follow-up grows stronger. Research centers and national labs have started funding cross-platform campaigns precisely because they reduce false positives. An isolated thermal blip is far less interesting than a thermal blip that lines up with a muon-defined void and a patterned seismic hum. The new emphasis is on correlative detection rather than single sensor revelation. Institutional culture has changed too. The political and scientific attention to aerial anomalies in recent years, formal hearings, public testimony, and open calls for data has normalized the notion that some phenomena previously dismissed by mainstream institutions merit careful study. congressional and oversight events have compelled agencies to declassify and share certain data and to fund interagency efforts. This openness matters because subsurface and aerial phenomena do not respect organizational stovepipes. When aviation reports, naval sonar echoes, and ground-based seismic anomalies can be correlated across datasets from different agencies and civilian groups, patterns begin to emerge that are scientifically tractable and less prone to single-source bias. That increased transparency and cross-disciplinary engagement has shifted the conversation from speculation toward coordinated empirical inquiry. All of this feeds directly into how close we might be to a discovery of a new subterranean phenomenon of biological or technological origin. There are a set of pragmatic criteria researchers use to determine whether continued investigation is justified and what kind of evidence would warrant public confirmation. These criteria are repeatability across independent sensors and teams, convergence of multiple modalities, thermal, muon, seismic, EM, biological traces on the same spatial coordinates, physical artifacts or residues resistant to contamination explanations, and reproducible behavioral effects on biological systems, animals, microbial communities, that correlate temporally with the detected signals. We have not yet reached a point where all these boxes are ticked simultaneously by a single, unambiguous dataset, but in multiple regions we see partial convergence, 2 or 3 modalities aligning in a way that is statistically unlikely by chance, and that merits deeper, careful exploration. A practical example of how a discovery pathway could unfold helps make this concrete. Imagine a mapped corridor where muon tomography suggests a rectilinear void complex beneath a ridge, and satellite thermal imagery shows transient moving warm patches above that ridge with a consistent velocity and direction. If low-frequency seismic arrays in adjacent valleys register harmonic pulses time-aligned with those thermal shifts, and field teams on the ground recover microscopic films, unusual mineral lattices, or resilient organic residues from sealed chambers, then a layered body of evidence exists that calls for staged engagement. Deploy extended passive sensor arrays, restrict intrusive activity to avoid contamination, bring in independent laboratories to analyze residues under strict chain of custody, and develop an international multidisciplinary oversight framework to manage the science and the ethics of any subsequent contact or intervention. The key point is stepwise, verifiable accumulation of evidence, not sudden proclamation. Much of the work in coming years will be to build the protocols that allow this careful progression. There are, of course, strong reasons for conservatism. The Earth is full of processes we do not fully model: transient hydrothermal flows, previously unknown microbial metabolisms that precipitate unusual minerals, and rare tectonic-sourced signals that sometimes mimic intelligent patterns when sparsely sampled. Robust science demands exhausting these natural explanations, expanded monitoring to capture variability across seasons, laboratory experiments to reproduce unusual mineral residues through plausible geochemical pathways, and careful control of sampling chains to rule out industrial contamination. That intellectual humility is not an obstacle to discovery. It is the guardrail that prevents premature claims and misdiagnosis. But prudence must be balanced with curiosity and timely action. There are pragmatic risks in delaying study: inadvertent contamination of a closed subterranean biosphere by drilling or poorly controlled expeditions, destruction of delicate biomineral archives before they can be documented, and missed opportunities to observe transient behaviors that only occur during specific geophysical windows. That is why many in the scientific coalition now argue for an approach that is precautionary, but proactive. Prioritize passive observation and non-invasive imaging first. use targeted, minimally invasive sampling only when multiple independent lines of evidence converge, and structure international protocols for access that emphasize conservation, transparency, and cross-disciplinary review. The human element of this process cannot be overstated. Discovery will not only be a technical accomplishment, but a cultural and ethical negotiation. If evidence mounts toward the presence of organized subsurface activity that meets the threshold for recognition, societies will face immediate questions. Who gets to decide how to engage? How to protect vulnerable subterranean ecologies? How to manage the flow of potentially disruptive technology? And how to avoid repeating the darker chapters of human contact history? Preparing ethically is as important as preparing instrumentally. The scientific community is already beginning to convene ethicists, cultural anthropologists, indigenous leaders, and public interest groups to draft frameworks that foreground respect, non-exploitation, and scientific integrity. There are also low-cost, high-value experiments we can recommend now that would accelerate reliable assessment without undue risk. First, install long-duration, low-power sensor arrays in hotspot regions, passive muon detectors paired with broadband seismic and infrasound microphones, long-term magnetotelluric stations, environmental DNA samplers at cave mouths and groundwater outputs, and multispectral thermal cameras tuned to slow, subtle anomalies. Second, build data pipelines for cross-agency sharing that allow match-time correlation between air, sea, and subsurface datasets. Many promising signals are only interpretable when viewed across platforms. Third, expand protocols for chain-of-custody sample collection from any recovered residues, with pre-registered independent labs ready to analyze organics and isotopic ratios under contamination-controlled conditions. Fourth, convene an international oversight body under scientific NGOs and UN auspices to provide transparent governance and rapid peer review when potentially sensitive findings emerge. These steps focus on reproducibility, minimal ecological impact, and ethical clarity. If we put all of these developments together, better imaging, denser and smarter arrays, more cross-disciplinary sharing, and pre-agreed ethical protocols, it becomes reasonable to say that we are closer now than at any time in recent memory to being able to detect, validate, and responsibly study anomalous subsurface phenomena should they exist. The difference between close and certain is that close connotes a pragmatic readiness to test and to confirm. Certainty requires a data set that meets the rigorous, multimodal criteria I outlined earlier. That data set is still outstanding, but the institutional scaffolding to seek it is far stronger. Finally, for the listener, there is a calm orientation that serves both curiosity and care. Discovery is not a single climactic reveal, but a long, patient process of correlation, replication, and ethical negotiation. Whether the emerging evidence ultimately points to new forms of subterranean life, to unknown geological processes, or to novel geochemical and biomineral phenomena, the methods we adopt in the next years will determine whether the outcome deepens our knowledge while preserving both human and subterranean communities. Hold this as a practical promise. The tools exist to move from reasonable speculation to testable science, and the social will, slowly but steadily, has begun to align around the need to do so responsibly. We are close enough to begin the next careful steps. How far we go depends not only on the signals we measure, but on the choices we make about stewardship, transparency, and patient inquiry.